I'm not buying that. I think everything from Smokey is short and stubby. You know what I mean? Look at his body.
He's married.
I'm married. Damn it.
Give me 1 second, Mark.
Technical difficulties?
A little bit.
Any thoughts on aliens? We've kind of talked about quite a bit so far.
Yeah, we have. We haven't covered the aliens. Aliens, they probably exist, but do they exist at the same time period we do? You know, if they haven't wiped themselves out, what are the chances of their civilization coinciding with exactly when we're here? So, if you think a civilization lasts 10,000 years, 20,000, the chances of them
what would make something an alien?
not being of this earth.
Not being of this earth. What if something was here before us?
Dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's what if there's been aliens living amongst us, quote unquote aliens, but they've been here the whole time? Then they wouldn't really be aliens.
That's true.
I mean, I guess maybe partially if they were not of this earth by your definition, then maybe they would still be aliens. We just got into some weird conversations. I don't know how it happened, but everybody listening, you guys need to get your shit together, is what I've learned from this time period with Ron Penna today. Because Ron just thinks that our time's going to run out eventually over here. We have about 70 more years of existence, right?
That's probably a good number.
What's happening? What's happening to mankind? We were talking about technology. And next thing I know, first we started out the day talking about rape and murder, and then we drifted off and started talking about the de-evolution of people because of technology. What is going on with technology? Can it be bad?
You may want to clarify the rape and murder before we go any further.
We did not rape and murder anyone.
No, but we did. When I landed here in Sacramento, I thought, this is the land of the Golden State Killer. And
I know, and I never heard about it. Now I'm fascinated. You said there's like a TV series, right?
There's I think it's a 4-part series, yeah, and on ID. And, between 76 and 86, there was a guy here in Sacramento who was known as the East Area Rapist. Another guy down in Southern California known as the original Night Stalker, not Richard Ramirez, but the original Night Stalker. And then in 2001,
two separate guys.
They thought it was two separate guys. And then in 2001, with DNA evidence, they realized, it's the same guy. And he's one of the most prolific rapists and serial killers out there.
It's fucking fascinating. I think I've been watching that Unabomber show with my son, and I'm totally locked in. I want to watch the whole thing. It's just insane to me what people will do. But as we were talking about technology, we're talking about this nanotechnology and all these things that get made. People get all excited. We have self-driving vehicles, and people can get stuff faster and cheaper, and there will be a point where there's self-driving trucks and stuff like that, probably all throughout the world. You'll probably get your car, might drive you somewhere, and you can be on your phone or do whatever the hell you want.
For sure.
Maybe the car, because it's a self-driving vehicle, maybe it won't even look like a car anymore. I saw that there's a car that can fly, and as of, I think, next year, you can buy it. It's like $600K. So right in everybody's price range. You can
a third of all males work in transportation right now. So within 30 years, all those jobs will be gone. So forklift operators, because that's the first thing they'll automate, and then ship captains, and a third of all males work in transportation worldwide. So you can imagine what's going to happen in 30 years or so.
That's crazy
as it gets automated.
I guess even mailing stuff, I'm sure they're going to probably figure out a way to automate all that too, right?
For sure.
They'll have a little robot or something will pop out, and he'll get chased by the dog instead of the way the mailman gets chased by the dog now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why do you think we only have 70 more years to go? What's happening?
Well, if you just look at what's going to happen, people have been predicting the end of mankind for centuries really.
Yeah.
But the only thing that's different is technology will hit a certain tipping point where ultimately an individual will have enough power in the palm of their hand to wipe out mankind. It's just a matter of how far away is that point.
That makes some sense. I mean, even in terms of being in a supplement industry, or being in the food industry, or being a manufacturer of products like I have slingshots and knee sleeves and knee wraps and all these different things. 40 years ago, that would probably be kind of hard to get going, right? Now it's a lot easier. Now you can Google stuff. I can look stuff up, and even as far as making a protein bar, maybe I do a really shitty job of it, but I can Google and search around, and I could, sometime this year, I could figure out how to release a protein bar.
Sure.
So somebody could start to, research this technology. There's more and more information out there all the time. Somebody could research how to make a bomb. Somebody could research how to, wipe out an entire city. Really, there's some scary shit coming up, and the self-automated cars. We talked about it recently on the podcast. It already killed somebody. They made it legal recently, and they had somebody driving the car. The person was clearly kind of looking at their phone. Now, the person on the bicycle was kind of going kind of fast on their bicycle, and they did pull out in front of the car, and they weren't in like they weren't at a traffic light or anything like that. They jetted in front of the car, but the car should have stopped, and it didn't, and now we got somebody dead from that. Yeah,
let's think about it in the future. Do you ever listen to Radiolab?
I have not.
You've never listened to the Radiolab podcast?
I haven't.
Wow, we're on a podcast talking about another podcast, but yeah, Radiolab it's a science podcast. But
I'll have to check it out.
Much more interesting than you'd think. They were talking about how in the future, they're going to have to program cars to make basically ethical decisions. You're in your car and there's 5 people crossing a crosswalk illegally in front of you. Does your car smash you into a wall and kill you, one person, or does it hit the 5 and kill them? And this apparently came up, I think Mercedes was at some car show, and this whole issue came up, and they kind of handled it wrong, and everyone was saying, I'd never buy a car that would, maximize human life. I want it to maximize my life. So now you're going to have car companies saying, hey, our cars, we think about you. We'll kill the other 5. And you got the next company saying, no, we maximize human life. We'll kill you, but we'll save the 5. So it gets pretty crazy when you're programming.
It brings up the topic of like, do we even need that? And I guess that's irrelevant because we're making it.
Unabomber said, go back to horses, right?
Yeah. He did not. He didn't like the idea of cars. He had his own crazy thoughts because he thought that the invention of cars was kind of a lie. It kind of made you seem like you were more free, that you could go and do whatever you wanted. But all it really did is lock people in their car more, because it created societies that were built around having transportation, having a vehicle. And that vehicle just took you to and from work, and people became more enslaved to that and to their work, and there you have it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Anyway, we are here with Quest Nutrition co-founder, Ron Penna, and Ron has been somebody that I've known for a few years now, and what I find interesting is a lot of people want to talk business, and in today's day and age, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and people want to know the secrets, and they want to know all these different things. But when I got around you, I immediately found out, I was like, this guy just loves learning about training. This guy just loves talking about diet, nutrition. This is just kind of a meathead. We sat down and we started talking about keto, and as soon as I said, oh yeah, I've been messing around with keto since like 1994, 1995, your eyes lit up, you got all fired up, and it's been a romantic conversation ever since that.
Bromance, if there ever was one.
It's been a hell of a bromance, and you started talking about some of the diet stuff that you tried, steak and eggs, and how did you start to find out about nutrition? How did you start to find out about some of these things?
For me, it was, I was in actually pre-college trying to get bigger, stronger. And I was a super skinny kid and lifted for about 2 years, got sick all the time. My immune system was trashed. Didn't really make any gains until I met a guy who basically said, hey, write down what you're eating. overhauled everything, took my protein way up, and then it was like magic. It was like, whoa, all of a sudden I realized the training piece is, 10%, 90% was food. And it truly was, you'd eat something and it would show up on your body, a few days later.
Yeah.
I thought, this is like, alchemy. I was so amazed. So that was kind of how it started. And what I love about nutrition is, unlike every other science, where pretty much you can agree on. In chemistry, you put, two reagents together and you get, something that happens and you can replicate it over and over. In nutrition, you can't get the most basic things agreed on. People are, saturated fat, it's terrible. It's creating heart disease. And, you got other people, no, saturated fat's the answer. That's really what you need to be doing. Keep your insulin low and you can eat as much saturated fat as you want. So, I always say, if it were aerospace, if the equivalent of aerospace were like nutrition, they'd still be arguing about which way to point the rocket, up or down. We got to figure that out first. So, and you look at the USDA, they just reversed a 30-year position on cholesterol. You don't see any other science that says, hey, we've been building bridges wrong for 30 years. Cars, we got to go back to the way we did it in the 50s.
Oh my God,
that
yeah.
never happens. But in nutrition, that frustrates people. I find that absolutely fascinating.
It is fascinating, and in today's day and age where we have so much convenience in front of us, we have so many snack foods, and we have so many fast food restaurants, Doritos, we got Oreos, all these kinds of things right at our fingertips, and I think a huge problem is just a lot of it's habits, right? People develop these habits. They get used to the flavors of these things. They become desensitized to how food should actually taste. Anyone who's tried a carnivore style diet, or anyone who has abstained from eating junk for a long period of time, knows how good some almonds can taste, or know how good eggs can taste, or butter, or a steak can taste fantastic. But you lose how that's supposed to taste when you start eating cereal and you start eating all these other things. Your body is really flooded with all this. But in my opinion, what I see is people are kind of behind in almost everything that they do. They're behind all day on everything. They go to bed too late. They wake up too late. They're behind the entire day, and because of that, it starts a cascade of stress. They don't ever really think about where they're going to get their food from, and therefore, they're already stressed. They make poor decisions. All of us make poor decisions when we're overstressed, and I think it's a repetitive cycle, and it is about the food, but I think that the food it just happens to be there, and it's people are making these poor decisions over and over again because they're stressed from their job, they're stressed from their spouse, they're stressed from all these different things. And I just kind of see it as people are kind of fighting this uphill battle every day. They're behind, and it's very hard for them to get ahead. The only way to get ahead is to win. The only way to win is develop good habits. But how do you develop good habits when you're behind? Some shit that I'm seeing just kind of over and over again. How are you seeing some of this go down?
Well, you talked a little bit about it also in the war on carbs, which is sleep. People think of sleep as, I'm going to try this new ergogenic aid over here. I'm going to try this nootropic over here. But sleep is, think about it. If you live to 90, a third of your life is spent sleeping. So it's also, if you're super well rested, you can train better, but you're super resistant to temptation. Your stress level's down. So I really think about sleep. It's also one of the most difficult things because of the amount of time it takes. So you can't just squeeze in 15 more minutes. And I don't know about you. Do you use an alarm? Do you wake up with an alarm?
I usually wake up before it. Like I don't really, I mean, I'll set it occasionally, but I usually wake up before an alarm goes off.
You should stop doing that.
Don't even set it at all.
Look, here's the thing. I find people say, I always wake up before my alarm. Yeah, that's because you're tense and there's some part of your brain. We've got, we've got a
saying, hey,
clock. Yeah, exactly. And the secret is if you need to wake up by a certain time, you got to go to bed earlier, which you talked about earlier.
Right.
And you got to make it a job where your goal is how much can I sleep? And you do that for some people, can take weeks, can take months. Once you work off your sleep debt, you start waking up super, super early. And, I never use an alarm, and I'm super rested all the time. And I'm not a guy who likes sleeping. I know a lot of people, I'd much rather not need to sleep. But the only thing I hate more than sleeping is being tired. So I always, I sleep as
being
much
tired
as
is fucking absolutely awful.
It's awful. And people get so used to it. Once you are rested, you'll never go back. Once you say, hey, like people go on vacation and they think, it's because I got away from, stress or whatever. A lot of it is people slept a lot. That's really what it comes down to.
Nothing can really help you when you're actually tired. you can try to fake it a little bit. You might get like a small spike in energy. You might have some coffee or something, but like it really just nothing really seems to get you out of that except for being able to get some rest.
Yeah. When I first met my wife, it took her a while to work. It took her 9 months to work off her sleep debt. And then so she started sleeping, 10, 11 hours, and then ultimately went back to 9 and then to 8 and then sometimes, 7.5. But you really do need to put in the time.
What's sleep debt? I never heard anybody talk about it in that sense.
Yeah,
Really?
I was just going to ask. It sounds very interesting.
Hashtag sleep debt.
Oh, well, William Dement is probably it certainly used to be the foremost sleep researcher. And I don't know if he coined the term or not.
What a fucking great thing to be known for.
Hey, yeah, because you stay up all
what
night.
What do you do for a living? Sleep. It's all about sleep.
It's better. Just the other day, I talked to another guy who's an expert in human fecal studies.
Poop stories.
So William Dement calls it. He says, "Look, sleep debt's like a backpack. People think they can get around sleep, but every hour of sleep that you miss, it's like throwing a brick into your backpack, and you're walking around carrying tons of sleep debt. And the only way they've done lots of things to try to work
Throwing
it off.
a brick in your back.
The only
I should
way
be
is
really jacked by now. Then it doesn't make any sense.
well, it doesn't work for you in that way.
Ah.
But he said, if you want to work it off, let's say you've got 70 bricks, the only way to get out of sleep debt is to re-sleep those 70 hours.
Shit.
I'm not sure I totally believe it, but they have research to back it up.
Yeah, they
Certainly,
do have more research now showing that you can kind of make up some sleep. But he's talking about you can make up sleep from like a long ass time ago.
Not only does he say you can, he said you will have to in order for you to ever be. If you sleep, if you lose 70 hours of sleep over a year, in order for you to get back to normal, you're going to have to repay those 70. He said people think that, oh no, I only need 4 or 5 hours. He said that those are people that are just working on chronic deficits. Actually, there's a guy, the book just came out about a month ago, and the guy said the same thing. He said the number of people that are fooling themselves saying, I can get by with X amount, like 5 or 6 hours. He said, really, they've studied this in the lab. And I think they say about 7 hours, 15 minutes, if I recall, or between 7 and 8 hours, pretty much every single person needs that. If you're not sleeping that much, you're just in sleep debt.
Yeah.
So, and you can measure inflammatory markers and things, and you can see, and you want to drop those. One of the not fastest, but one of the most effective ways to do it, just get people to the point where, put like let's say $100 million in their bank account. They have no stress and they can sleep really well. Their inflammatory markers drop. It's not very replicable. But
Right.
Mark, let's
but
try
it
it.
works.
I'm down.
Let's
I'll
try.
Be
You
your, I'll
ready?
be your test subject if
Yeah.
you're interested.
We'll have to take a baseline. So we got to take his blood now, and then before we deposit the $100 million.
Dude, I'll be
You're
the
in?
lab rat. Yeah, I'm in.
I'm glad. It's so hard to find candidates for this.
Right.
This is great.
Yeah, I'm down for the cause.
When you're talking about being able to get proper rest, you and I, we both work for ourselves. It's a weird thing working for yourself because I'm sure you've come to the same realization that I did, that you don't really you end up still being trapped in some weird way into doing some things that you don't always want to do. But anyway, being able to set your own schedule. And not having an alarm, not having to necessarily be in a certain spot at a certain time, or even if you do, just getting the proper rest is going to be key. So for you, how do you kind of set up your day in order to get the right amount of sleep? Is it always kind of start with you being conscious of, okay, A, B, C is coming up later in the week. I'm going to have to, are you kind of prepping yourself for that?
So, I guess there's two kinds of people. There's people that like similarity and sameness every day, and there's people that like variety. I'm definitely not someone that likes sameness all the time. However, I have found my body thrives on consistency. My training thrives on consistency. So to me, I've always been battling, wanting to have a different day, every day different. So I go to bed the same time pretty much every day between 9 and 10, usually like 9:30. And I wake up. If I wake up in the middle of the night, or if I wake up at any time, I try to go back to sleep, get as much sleep as I can until I just can't stay in bed, and then I get out. And you find that your time dwindles down to the point where you're only sleeping exactly what you need. But it's a matter of consistency. This whole idea, I've tried it, of like, hey, weekends I'll stay up later. It doesn't work, and I think that we're very susceptible to the amount of light in the environment. So even if you're sleeping, let's say 8 hours and 15 minutes, and you're not using an alarm clock, that's good, but I think getting those hours that are in conjunction with the light into your eye makes a big difference. Like, one of the things we have been kind of scared of UV light, but this was something really interesting I read about recently. In China, in the 60s, kids there had about a 20% incidence of myopia. So, they couldn't see far away. They had to wear glasses. What do you think it is today? The percentage of kids, it used to be 20 in the 60s. What do you think it is today? Kids that wear glasses in Taiwan and China?
That's probably double.
96%.
Holy shit.
So obviously not enough time has occurred for a genetic change to happen. So they were trying to figure out, hey, what did it? And make a long story short, they looked at that 4% of the kids, and those were kids that spent a lot of time outside. And at first they thought it was that they were maybe looking at longer distances, and they figured out that it was the amount of UV light that they got in their eye.
It's crazy.
So
you get some of that from a tanning bed, right?
You can, yeah. And they figured out, like, I think you need like 10,000 lux, which is 10,000 candle power. And, you know, they're understanding it better and better. But now they're actually holding classes outside, because if kids don't have UV light in their eyes, they will actually develop myopia. And it's much more prevalent in Taiwan and China, but here too. You know, a lot more people wear glasses today than they did certainly, 200 years ago.
You ever heard the phrase, as far as the eye can see?
I have.
Have you ever tried to look that up before?
You mean the etymology of where it comes from?
No, which I've done that as well, but just how far can you actually see?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I never have.
It's mind-boggling. You can see really fucking far is the truth of it. So it has to do with, how big something is, obviously. So you can see something from very, very, very far away, if it's large enough, or if nothing's obscuring your view. If you can kind of look it up and poke around, you can't really find like a real answer, but it's amazing how well your eyes can actually work.
Yeah.
And it's something like, I pop up questions like this with my son. He's always really fascinated with something. Somebody will say something and he'll be like, what does that phrase mean? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know. I don't even know what that actually means. I don't even know how far the eye can actually see. In researching some of this stuff, I know you're fascinated with trying to be as efficient as possible in kind of all aspects of your life, it seems like. What's the deal with like a bed? Like, can we sleep on just a normal bed? Do we need to get some special bed, or should we be sleeping on the ground? I mean, a lot of people are trying to move towards like more natural things. What's your thoughts on some of that?
When I was probably like 19 or so, I was talking to a spine surgeon, and for some reason he started talking about beds, and I said, what do you think the best bed is? And he said, firm. I said, is firm good, or is really firm even better? He's like, well, it probably doesn't matter, but real firm is better for your spine. And he's ultimately said, a futon, something like that. And I think firmness is a big deal. People love super soft beds.
Yeah.
I know that if I sleep in a hotel or something, I can sleep pretty much anywhere. I don't have any problems, but compared to a firm bed, your lower back doesn't get tight or anything like that. So I think firmness is a big deal. Obviously darkness is the other one in a bed, but
so technology can play to our favor sometimes, in some cases. So we don't have, like, when it comes to food, food has made a lot of advances. There's a lot of different things out there that you can grab a hold of. Even as far as preparation of our foods. And as I've been kind of diving down this rabbit hole and, experimenting with the carnivore diet and looking at a lot of different things, just trying to open my mind and understand that, like, I could be wrong about a bunch of stuff, and just trying to find answers, really. You start to learn that, like, there's a lot of things that are, inherently wrong with things like, things that you were taught were healthy. And you start to learn, well, these things aren't even natural. Something like olive oil. You'll have one group of people say olive oil is great, the fats in it are great, and they do this, that, and the other thing. And someone else say it's terrible, but it's not a naturally occurring thing, olive oil. You can't really, but humans have made it. Have we made some stuff, whether it be fruit juices, supplements, have we made some things that should be accepted, like a bed, obviously I think we would all agree that a toilet is a good invention, because the other option isn't great.
Not all would agree. Actually, there's people out there saying,
well,
hey,
listen,
the very position that we, go to the bathroom in, you should be in a squatting position.
We have the squatty potty here at the gym. Yeah.
I actually noticed that. I was like, wow, these people are really advanced.
Yeah.
So yeah, not everybody would agree with that, but
We're
yeah,
into
you're
our
right.
poop.
Yeah. Well, you guys look at every single aspect, which I love, of health and nutrition and training.
Leave no stone unturned.
One thing I did just read actually yesterday, they were looking at two types of primates, and they have basically the little guys, they sleep sitting up, and then all the big guys, they sleep lying down, and they actually make a bed. And because somebody was asking the question, why do we use pillows? It seems kind of, a new invention. And they were saying, no, if you look at the large apes, they sleep with pillows and they make a bed. And they've looked at EEG, so they actually are measuring brain waves. The large apes have much deeper sleep than the monkey, or the primates that are sitting up. So they think that being able to get to those deep levels of sleep did kind of require a lying position and creation of a bed and a pillow, which is sort of surprising. So that's one thing that may seem a little newfangled, but probably makes sense. Certainly a soft mattress. I know my dogs, if they have the opportunity to lay on concrete or on a bed, they'll always take the bed, and they will take, we have a couple of beds, but my wife was saying the other day, they always take the bed that has the little pillow headrest, and they put their head on it. So I think that's pretty ingrained in us.
They want to be comfy.
They do, and there's something nice about having your head supported. So I think that's actually a fairly natural phenomenon.
You've told this story probably 10,000 times, but let's just have you share it with us. Tell us kind of how the Quest Nutrition whole thing got started. You told me a little bit earlier that originally you were kind of into technology and some of your advancement from there into Quest Nutrition.
Yeah, so I had a couple of software companies. We built and sold some software companies. And at that time, this is probably going back 8.5 years or so, my wife was making protein bars. She was competing in figure. So, wanted to get really lean. And we didn't eat any of the protein bars on the market simply because they had a lot of like maltitol at the time and things. And they were all loaded with carbs. So she would just make them at home and we'd eat them. And then one day she said, take these to work. And I took them in and I went into the tech room where we had, like 15 guys that were, programmers. And, there's like Dorito wrappers over here in the corner and, regular Coke and, Snickers. And I gave them to them and I said, hey, my wife made these. They're just a low carb protein bar. And the next day I came back and they said, hey, can we get more of those? And I was thinking, wow, that's kind of strange because these guys are out there. They can eat whatever they want. Why are they asking for this? And I brought more and they ate those. And obviously that was the genesis of the idea, this could be a business because food was such a big impact in my life. And we wanted it quite selfishly for ourselves so that we could keep our carbs low as we were on the road. And that was really the beginning of it. So that was the genesis of it. Took a long time to actually make it into a shelf-stable product. But my wife made the first 14 bars and she was the R&D department for the first couple of years.
What was the transition like into like starting a business? Now, did you already have some money from selling the tech companies and things like that?
Yeah, we had so I have a business partner of 28 years. We were college roommates and basically said, hey, you know what, let's get rich. And that was really the reason we got into business. A lot of people say they want to help other people or they want to do things, but quite frankly, I'd just seen a lot of people struggle with money. And I said, actually somebody showed me a videotape when I was 18. And one of the things it said is do not work for other people. Don't trade time for money. Find a way to become unimportant to the generation of your own income. And I was young enough and dumb enough to believe that. So I started off and, we started off in the restaurant business. We had 3 different restaurants. We were like 19 to 21 years old. I remember waiting to turn 21 so we could get our liquor license to sell alcohol. And it looked great. We had, 60 employees. Everybody thought, oh, this is amazing. Well, you had a, full course load in school. Make a long story short, we got our asses handed to us in the restaurant business and then got beat up in a lot of other businesses. So we learned how to lose a lot of money. We did that and started in technology about 95. And we built and sold 2 companies. And
was there any times in there where you were like, geez, like a lot of this shit ain't working kind of thing?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think for, Micah Osborne and I, my business partner, we looked at each other and said, ever since I've been hanging out with this guy, I've been getting poorer and poorer. So you can't, try to move towards a goal and keep getting further and further away.
You guys are like, hold on, there's got to be one good idea in here somewhere.
There's got to be. And why we kept hanging out, didn't seem to make a lot of sense at the time. But we always knew that, our other option was just to go and get a job, which didn't sound very interesting. So we kept through it. And when we got on the internet, we weren't really particularly enamored with computers or anything like that, but we knew that the internet was going to be this big thing and it was going to change the world. And we said, we better learn it. Otherwise we're going to, kick ourselves. And then we got into software and learned how to write. We weren't coding software. We built teams. And that's really the big thing I think we learned over the whole time is how do you build a team? Because business is the one sport, if you want to call it that. There is no amazing single person in business. Everything comes down to a team. You've got people that are great singers or maybe a great golfer that can do everything pretty much by themselves. But in business, there's no way around it. I mean, I've tried to think of ways around it, but you're ultimately going to have to, deal with those human dynamics, and how well you put those together is what determines the fate of the business. If you have a great team and you know how to give people what they need at the right time to keep them going, you can build something that's much bigger than you.
That's actually very interesting. I think only in the technology space could you learn something like that, because with other businesses, there's just not as many facets to it. When it comes to technology, when it comes to building a website, there's just so many other things that go into it. How has that background helped you with Quest Nutrition?
That's actually a good point that I've never had anyone bring up, but you're right. Since I don't code and my business partner didn't code, we had to rely on other people. So you had to get good at figuring out who actually could do what they said. And you're right. It kind of forces you to bring disparate groups with different skill sets together. Quest was always kind of a tech company in the sense that our website was very important to us. A lot of protein bar companies, when we started, 7 years ago, they didn't even sell anything on their website. That wasn't a big deal. They were in grocery stores.
Would you say that your website oftentimes was maybe a little bit ahead of where you guys were, or was it kind of in line with where you wanted to go, or was it behind where the company was? When
you say ahead or behind, in what sense?
Just look, feel, operational.
I'd say it was always behind, because what you have in your mind is never
I understand
is good. But it in terms of efficacy, I think really it was 2 years before we put the protein bars in any stores, and that was really good because it allowed us to control our destiny. Most people, they create a product and they want to get it on shelf. The problem is that the value in building a company is building the brand. For two reasons. Number one, a lot of people think, if I can just get it into the distributor or get it on someone's shelf, well, it's going to sit there and usually be yanked off the shelf. And that's the worst situation. You need to build the brand. You got to build followers. You got to actually get the product in people's hands. Only then, when it goes on a shelf, now you're enabling that customer to act. And a lot of people don't realize it's your job to build the brand. It's not, it's not the distributor's job. They're really just enabling the product to exist so that when people want it, they get it. But you have to let that awareness build.
What do you think is something that really separated the company out? For me, being a huge fan of bodybuilding for many years, and being someone who's taken every supplement. We talked earlier about HMB and vanadil sulfate and all these different weird things that we've tried and done. And I've had nearly every protein bar. At this point, I haven't had every protein bar because there's so many on the market now. But all the old school ones I've tried. I tried many of them, and a lot of them caused a lot of problems for me. And when the Quest bar came out, I remember right away recognizing that it was different. The texture was almost a little bit more like the original Metrex bar, which was loaded with tons of sugar, and one of the few bars that actually didn't hurt my stomach. But the Quest bar, it chose to go a different route. It used a different style of fiber and all these different things. Do you think there was a particular thing about the taste of the bar, the design of the bar? What was it that made it different? Because Quest Nutrition, I think was, at one point you guys were the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing companies in the United States, period, regardless of the space you were in.
Yeah. So I think the accurate thing to say is Quest is probably the second fastest growing food company. Chobani was number one. They went from 0 to $1 billion in 5 years. That's unbelievable. We went, so we were number two. And if you want to kind of put your finger on what it was, it's a little surprising to me because you got to give people credit. We were a low carb bar, truly, and we were obsessed with that. You know, we had our own war on carbs simply because giving people more opportunities to eat carbs is not exactly a pressing national issue right now. There's plenty of, you know, Doritos are delicious. You got cinnamon rolls that are amazing.
Doritos are fucking great.
They are. And the people that, you know, the most advanced part of food science really is the taste. Like if you think about Cool Ranch, the amount of science that's gone into that, it's amazing. You can just put one in your mouth and you're like, wow, these scientists really know what they're doing.
By the way, side note, I've done all the research extensively. There is nothing better for weight gain than a fucking Dorito. I swear to God, you can't even tell what a Dorito is, like in its original form. Like you don't know what it came from.
Right.
I mean, they say that you can't make something out of nothing, but I think a Dorito is something out of nothing.
But you realize one of the best ways to train your mind is to buy a bag of Doritos and eat one and leave the open bag there all day. Your mind will get so strong if you can resist. It's pretty amazing. They really do. Like you can actually feel yourself craving it. It's
man, I got to try that. That sounds terrible.
It is terrible, but man, you feel
Jess,
so
can we do that at this gym? No one would survive, would they?
Yes.
Anyway.
So just to finish up what you were asking about, it was the fact that people saw, oh, wow, this really does have low net carbs. Because, you know, the protein bar came from a pretty checkered past. Like some of the old bars were using sugar alcohols to hide carbohydrate. And people got it. They were like, you know, I have plenty of carb sources in my life if I want those. But if I want something that's low carb and has protein and fat, then that's really the way to go. And we did sit around and talk about, will people get this? And we were told, you got to remember, the year before we started, there were 1,100 protein bars that were added to the market.
Oh my God.
And we were told in the first 2 years, listen, I need another protein bar like another hole in the head. And people don't want your kind of bar. They want candy. They want things that are coated, and they want things with chewy, gooey nuts, and they don't really care about the nutrition. They want to fool themselves. That's what we were told.
Right.
And we said, listen, that may be true. I remember the first Arnold sports festival we went to, we pretty much couldn't give the product away. We had, you know, we'd hand it out to them. They'd put both hands up and say, I don't eat protein bars. And we'd have to say, oh, you're our customer. And the first 2 years, people imagine, because, you know, we went from 0 to 400 million in 4 years. And people think, oh my God, it was so easy. But it certainly wasn't as hard as a lot of other businesses. But the first year, it was really surprising how resistant it was. But once people saw the macros, that's really, and that's why I say you got to give people a lot of credit, because people really got, I probably should be cutting my carbohydrate consumption back.
That is a huge reason why it took off, in my opinion. When I remember years ago, and again, I've been on and off a ketogenic diet for a long time, and being a power lifter and veering off the diet and having different goals and wanting to be as big as possible. I remember when the Quest bar first kind of came around, and I was looking at it and I was like, man, this is really a great product, because who can I think of that this doesn't fit in their diet, you know, if it fits your macros, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. Flexible dieting is a huge thing. I'm like, flexible dieting, if it fits your macros, a ketogenic diet, somebody who's bulking, somebody who's cutting, I'm like, this fits everybody. And it also has fiber. It's like a lot of times we could use that extra fiber with all the protein we're eating sometimes.
Yeah, and philosophically, that's how we look at the company, is you want to give people control, because there really is no ideal diet. I mean, people have different opinions on this, and obviously the science is not straightforward, but I think it's probably clear that our diets are going to cycle at different times. And if you don't give people the opportunity to take their fat or protein up or down, or fat or carbs, you know, you don't want to create something that's across the board. The macros are the same. Like, so if our chips are basically 72% protein, whereas a Quest bar is about 40 to 50% protein, you know, by calories. And that's really depending on what you're doing, whether you're cutting, as you said, or whether there's some sort of performance thing you're getting ready for. You just want to give people control. And that's ultimately the company promises: control over nutrition without having to give up that craving. You know, you can, basically indulge your cravings without the foods moving you backwards. They're going to actually move you forward, because that's one thing we never wanted to do. A lot of companies are now saying, hey, we're better for you. We're going to make a chip with a little bit less carb. We're going to make a drink with a little bit less sugar. That was never our philosophy. It's either food or it's not. And, you know, we were chasing chicken breast, broccoli, steak, and that's what we kind of aspired to.
So when you guys first started, you just mentioned that it was like almost for selfish reasons, like you just wanted to make money. When you guys came out with the bar, was that also for selfish reasons, like you just wanted a bar for yourselves to take because you guys were both into fitness?
Yeah, really. I mean, that's what it was, is we were eating, I guess what you'd call the prototype of a Quest bar for probably 8 or 9 months before starting the company. And, I think we all have things in our lives. I'm sure Mark he didn't say, hey, this is a way to help people. He probably had tricep, shoulder problems, et cetera, and said, hey, I got to solve this problem for myself. And
Right.
that's usually how these things start is, it's the typical entrepreneur's conundrum. Like, hey, what's a problem I can solve? That's one way to go about it. And a lot of times there's something in your life that you see, hey, here's a problem. Oh, I solved it for myself. Then someone says, hey, Mark, what the hell is that? And then before you know it, now you're thinking about how you can take over the market in Kuwait. But
Right.
that's, it definitely starts, I think oftentimes starts from a selfish thing.
It's an interesting thing for me to go through this learning process. It's been very slow for me because I don't know. It's a weird thing. I am not really that driven by money. Now I am driven by like doing better, and money is a byproduct of that. That's the company has to continue to move forward. So, in a sense, nowadays I am driven by that. I do want to move the needle. I do want to provide more for people. But what you said earlier today really took me back, and so. When someone says they want to make a lot of money, there's a lot of things that people can do with that money. They can kind of, they can do whatever they want. They can start their businesses and stuff. But I think what you chose to do is absolutely fucking amazing. It really blows my mind what you're able to work on with this Ketopet sanctuary. I think it's an amazing cause. I think it's wonderful what you're doing. I have friends who've had cancer. I have friends that have children that have cancer. So to me, that is a really awesome thing that you're doing. And so how did some of this start? Some of just a fascination with nutrition in general?
Yeah, so that's one of the things is, if you have money, what do you do with it? Obviously, when you're 18,
make it rain.
Well, yeah, that, and when you're 18, you want the Lamborghini or whatever. But really, it ultimately comes down to resources in terms of being able to make things happen in the world. And Ketopet started. Well, I guess I'll go back. There was 2 guys that came to our office at Quest. Probably 5 years ago. One was Dominic D'Agostino. You may know him. He's probably
Absolutely, yeah.
the best connected.
Shit, that guy is sharp, and that guy's strong. He's incredibly strong.
He is ridiculously strong. He trains about like 15 minutes in the gym, like 2 times a week. That's
Really?
He lives in the lab. He's got tons of students. He's got a lot of responsibilities. But he's a keto guy. He's
Right.
done a lot of work with the Navy, and he was the guy who really put ketogenic diets with hyperbaric oxygen. And then Tom Seafried.
He lived underwater for like 10 days or something.
He did. He does a lot
nuts.
of crazy stuff. He's a really nice and super smart guy. And he came with a guy named Peter Attia, who I don't know. Do you know Peter Attia?
Yeah, absolutely.
Peter is a super interesting guy well.
I need to get connected to him because I think he would be wonderful in the movie.
He
my
would
brother
be.
and I work on.
He would be. Remember though, actually, you know what? He's a closet meathead as well. Like, you would never know it, but if you get him talking about training, he will.
I love it.
So he'd be a great guy. They basically came to the office and they spent the day with us and they educated us on basically fat metabolism and ketones, and we got a huge appreciation for the importance of fat. And we heard a lot about ketogenic diets, which, you may know were started in the 1920s at Johns Hopkins University to help kids who had epileptic seizures. They worked super, super well, actually better than the drug protocols they had and still have today. And they were kind of relegated to epilepsy. And then in the last maybe 10 years or so, people started talking about, wait a minute, cancer. There's a guy named Otto Warburg who in Germany figured out that basically cancer cells have a different type of metabolism than normal cells. And it relies primarily on glucose for its fuel source. And people started thinking, wait a minute, ketogenic diets, the ketogenic diets increase fat metabolism and they suppress glucose. Maybe that makes sense. Boy, this is getting to be a long-winded story, but
That's okay.
Make a long story short, they came to the office and we started thinking about
I like the story.
ketones.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see, hey, is this real? Because I heard about this guy who cured his cancer with ketogenic diet. Hey, this lady over here did it. And I said, hey, can I see the PET scan? Oh, well, he's actually in Italy, and I could never get the information, because one of the things you got to be careful is that you're not fooling yourself. A lot of people just, they believe it. So there's a lot of credible, there's definitely science. I'd say ketogenic diets are the most scientific diet, but nobody's ever put any money into determining, is it really what it's cracked up to be? Because there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's no pharmaceutical, there's nothing there. So we said, the best group of mammals to try this on would be dogs, because we can control their diets. Dogs can't drive to McDonald's. They can't eat Doritos. So if we write it down on a
you
piece
ever
of
seen
paper,
Family Guy?
you're right. I'll say this: without human intervention, they can't get the Doritos in their mouth. So we got a 53-acre ranch. We did it in Texas because we needed a radioactive materials license because we wanted to get a PET scan. A PET scan is what you use in human medicine to determine. It's the gold standard to determine if people have cancer. Basically, you inject them with radioactive glucose. And you look at, hey, which cells are burning more glucose? The cells that are burning more glucose are cancer cells. And that's the Warburg principle is the actual definition of how we determine cancer in a PET scan. So PET scans aren't used in veterinary medicine. So we got our own PET scan, which was, as you can imagine, about $50,000 a month just to have one of those. And we basically took dogs from kill shelters. It sounded like a really simple idea. Hey, we'll go to kill shelters. Right before they inject that dog, we'll say, stop, we'll take it. We'll put hundreds of thousands of dollars into that dog, and we're going to try to cure it of cancer with ketogenic diet. So we'd go, and they were like, who are you guys? How do I know this dog's not going to end up in like a fighting arena? It's a 7-pound Chihuahua. Why would it, come on. It was very difficult to get the dogs released.
Yeah.
Finally, we did. Make a long story short, we got quite a few dogs with just about every type of cancer out there. We put them on ketogenic diets. We took a PET scan on day 0, day 60, and day 120, and we had amazing results.
That's incredible. What kind of results did you end up having? How many of these dogs get cured of anything, or?
So the word cure is a very charged word. Here's what I can tell you. There's actually a book called the Keto Bible. It's about 700 pages. It's got every PET scan, all the histologies and all the pathology reports. Here's what I can say in a short period of time. There's something very powerful about ketogenic diets and cancer. We have certain dogs that had like hemangiosarcoma. It's the #1 killer of dogs. If you type in hemangiosarcoma to Google, you'll see usually they don't even recommend chemotherapeutics. They say, listen, just enjoy your time with your dog because it's just a matter of time. We have a bunch of dogs, some of the ones actually that were on screen there, who had hemangiosarcoma, and they have no evidence of disease, which is really what, the word cure is really never used very much in cancer. No evidence of disease means we can't see it.
Gotcha.
So if you look at Callie, actually Callie's about to come on screen here. There she is right there. So her first, there she is again. I think when we got her first PET scan has 6 or 7 spots. Yeah. Her next PET scan, which is 2 months later, has like 3 spots that are glowing. And then her third PET scan had 0. We PET scanned her a 4th time, and then we've given her about 17 to 20 ultrasounds after that to make sure. She had hemangiosarcoma. She was given, I think originally 6 weeks, and that was 3.5 years ago. So hemangiosarcoma is one. We've done mast cell. We've done, all kinds of.
In what period of time was this done? How many weeks were the dogs on this diet?
We've kept Callie on the diet since that time, so for 3.5 years. But it was a 120-day program. That was just an arbitrary thing we kind of established.
That's fast.
It is fast. But remember, so let's make sure we get all the data out here.
Right.
We didn't cherry pick dogs. So we had dogs that died 2 days after we got them. We have dogs with massive, I can show you pictures, massive tumors. We also did not have a control group. So this wasn't like a randomized, controlled trial. A lot of people say, you guys are doing great science. It's not really science.
And you have dogs, so you're connected to this pretty, that's not an easy thing.
No.
Having these dogs sick and having these dogs die.
Yeah. My wife was, she had to fly into Ketopet and, it's not a lot of fun, some piece of it, but we have so many success stories. So basically, if we got a dog early, with a few exceptions, there was a time, I remember for maybe the first 1.5 years of the program, we had 0 metastasis, meaning, when you get a tumor, you don't die of that tumor generally. You die of when it spreads. And for a while, we were able to say we never had any mets, but that's not true. At the end, we had a couple of dogs that metastasized, even on the diet. So here's what I can tell you. After Ketopet, we did 3 human studies. One with Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. It's a famous, hospital. We were working with brain cancer patients there. We did a breast cancer trial, and it's pretty amazing. The funny thing is, the breast cancer trial turned into a weight loss study. So I think it was 20 some women, and they lost a collective 360 pounds. Even though we were trying not to lose weight, the goal was just to put them in ketosis and focus on the cancer.
Does that have anything to do with cancer treatment as well? were they getting
No, because these were women.
radiation?
No, these women weren't getting any other
Gotcha.
treatment. These were women that had super early stage or stage 0 as they call it. So there wasn't any chemotherapy to worry about. There wasn't anything like that. But it was just interesting as one of the side effects was, their cardiovascular markers look great. I mean, their inflammatory markers dropped to nothing. And a lot of the cardiologists were saying, wait a minute, you're eating what? You're eating bacon, you're eating all this stuff. But they ended up saying, listen, whatever you're doing, I've been following you for 30 years. I've never seen your blood markers like this. So keep doing it. So that was kind of an interesting side effect.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Obviously, I'm sure that you've had testing done to see if you have cancer yourself, since you were learning about a lot of this stuff. Is that right?
I have, yeah.
How does our average person, someone who's just listening to this, like what, first of all, would you advise that people kind of get that checked out? And is it simple or easy, or is it really expensive or complicated or anything?
It's super expensive, super complicated, very confusing. So speaking frankly, right now where we are, it's pretty interesting because you think about the war on cancer. Did they rip that off of you? I don't know.
They might
may
have. Well, it's an interesting thing because I recently have, for the employees here, I try to do certain things for them, little perks and stuff that we do. And, I paid for everybody to get their blood work done. We got a guy reading the blood work and just trying to help everybody out. Anyone who's interested in, wanting to know what's going on in their body and all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned it to Bruce, and Bruce is like, man, Ron saved my life. He had, these different tests done on some of us, and somebody came in, they checked us out, and he had this kind of rare thing going on. But even just something as simple as giving blood, which is should be an easy process because it's really for somebody else. Giving blood can be beneficial to someone like myself, where my iron can sometimes be a little bit high. But it's kind of a pain in the ass. Not the actual act of giving the blood, but you go there, you answer like 50 questions. It's time consuming. It's cumbersome. You could be sitting there for like 30 minutes or so. And it's just, to do it once a year, it's worth it. It's a good cause. It could save somebody's life. But it is a pain in the ass. Even to do certain things like get body fat tests done, it's hard to know, what style of body fat test do I do? A lot of these things are just kind of a pain in the balls. And it would be great if things were just made to be a little bit faster and easier.
You are totally right. And, there's just getting blood work alone. First of all, you got to find a place to get it. Usually you got to get a physician. At least in Los Angeles, where I live, there's a place called Wellness Mart. You can just walk in and you check off what you want, and there is a physician on staff and you can get it. So they're making it easier. But the biggest problem is the interpretation of those results, because nobody wants to be the guy saying, hey, this means that. You mentioned iron, and something I've been reading a lot about. You can get a serum ferritin test, Ferritin. By the way, do we want to go deep, or is this like a shallow show?
Go for it.
Are you sure your readers will get it? Aren't they meatheads and stuff?
Well, we don't have readers, so they're all just listening. We're good.
Did I say readers?
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant listeners. So you're telling your audience is sophisticated and we want to go deep.
Yeah, I mean, might as well. I mean, this podcast is going to take a really long time, I think.
Okay.
I think we're just going to be here.
If it's not deep, it doesn't count. So let's do it.
So ferritin is kind of interesting.
Sorry, I got excited.
Ferritin's kind of interesting. This is something I never really thought about. I read about it. I don't know if you remember the book Protein Power.
Yeah.
2001, Mary, Dan, and Michael Eads, who I have tremendous respect for, they wrote a book called The Protein Power Life Plan in 2001. And they said, you should get your iron tested, get your serum ferritin levels. And ideal would be probably between 50 and 70 nanograms. And what they said is that as you get older, especially for males, because males don't menstruate, so they hold on to their iron, your levels are going to get higher and higher and higher. And iron is very, very reactive. It's so dangerous in the body that we actually have ferritin, which actually wraps the iron and protects it. And if you look at, breast milk has 0 iron. And there's reasons for that. Iron it's a heavy metal. It's very reactive. There's been quite a bit of research. If you just take iron from somebody who has high iron, their insulin sensitivity gets better just in and of itself. So it's possible for, meatheads that you could actually get leaner potentially. But it's a test you want to take, and the reference range for iron, it cuts off as high as, depending on what reference range you use, 330 nanograms, or I think I've seen some as high as 430. Males, as they get older, every decade after like 18, you get more and more iron. And the only real way to get rid of it is to give blood, as you said. And it's one of the things you want to track. And this is opinion, and I wouldn't say this is established science, but you probably want to be in the 50 to 70 nanogram range. I had mine done recently. I came back at 327. So I will be for the next, it'll probably take me 8 sessions, which you can only do every 8 weeks. But I'm going to try to get my levels, below 70. So, but you're right. The pain in the ass factor, I think it's great that you did that here because, you can benefit from it so easily.
Well, and then there's so many different things that you can get tested. It's hard to even know, what you should get tested.
Well, I'll give you an opinion on that. So just to maybe make it a little easier, I think HSCRP, which is high sensitivity CRP, that's a really good overall inflammation marker. If that number is high, there's a lot of other stuff going on. So if you come back with a super low, I think that's thumbs up. I think that's a good one. And then there's ways to measure insulin sensitivity like C protein and fasting insulin. So you basically go in without fasting. If you look at centenarians, people that live over 100 years, they smoke. There's ones that drink. There's ones that eat Doritos. But the one thing they all share, there's really 2 things that you can say about centenarians. Number one, they're usually lean. You don't really see people over 100 that are really fat. Secondly, they have great insulin sensitivity. Beyond that, it gets tough. It's kind of disappointing. People thought, let's just look at people that are living forever and we'll see what their secret is. But it points to the fact that, controlling insulin is a really, really important thing. So we talked about ferritin. We talked about HSCRP. That's an easy one. You get high sensitivity CRP, C protein, which is a measure of insulin sensitivity, and fasting insulin. And if those are very, very low, they'll give you a reference range, and you want to be definitely on the lower end of the reference range. Those are some easy ones because, a lot of the things that people measure, in my opinion, aren't really that interesting. And generally, looking at a
lot of people were making a big deal about cholesterol, and it's kind of turned out to be that maybe that's not a real indicator of heart disease.
Yeah, there's it seems to be 50% of the people have terrible markers, and the 50% of those people that have terrible markers don't get heart disease, and the others do. And then you got people with amazing, so-called amazing blood work, and they 50% get heart disease, 50% don't. So I think our understanding there definitely is complicated. Additionally, the typical panel people run, if you want to know more, you got to get like an NMR lipo profile, which goes much more deeply. It's actually counting the type of particles of cholesterol. But I think at the end of the day, 10, 15 years from now, people are going to say, listen, that was a big distraction. We were looking in the wrong place. There definitely are markers that I think are going to correlate. I just think that we're not there. And there's some people that are doing some pretty interesting work. I think the next 10 years, it'll be clarified. Because right now, people just say, hey, my cholesterol is too high. Well, you shouldn't even say that. That doesn't mean anything.
10 years can't come quick enough. My dad just had, I think, 2 100% clogged arteries, and they said it was all due to a weird high cholesterol level in his body because his body naturally produced high cholesterol.
Yeah. So this Peter Attia, we talked about him. He knows. He may be, I'm going to take a guess here, he's probably the 4th best knowledgeable guy on this. There's a couple things you can measure, like desmosterol, and you can be a hyper responder or a hyper producer, which can give you something. I'll tell you one thing. I just recently had a coronary calcium score done. What that does is it basically is looking in your arteries to determine, do you have calcification happening? And that's one of the tests. Your test score is either 0 or it's something. If your test score is 0, that's regardless of what your cardiovascular markers say, that's a big deal. But that's where you start seeing it. And had we done that to your dad 10 years ago, we would have seen, ooh, gosh, he's got calcium building up.
Yeah.
That is the bad news about it is by the time you're no longer 0, something's wrong. But obviously, there's a big difference between 1, 2, 3 higher as you go. And then also you can do something called an IMT, a scan of your carotid artery, which stands for intramedial thickness. And basically you can do it here. We did it at Quest. We had a guy come in with a little ultrasound probe and they just go up and down your artery and they give you the score. And if you start to see stuff building up, it's really powerful to know, oh my gosh, I'm already seeing the beginning of heart disease. Whereas if you never think about it, it's not that motivating to do anything about it. So unfortunately, you should definitely get an IMT scan. How old are you?
So I'm going to be 33.
So A lot of people would say you'd start with an IMT. It's super non-invasive. If there's a problem, you might want to consider a coronary calcium score. But an IMT, they're cheap. They can actually come here to the office and do it, or you can just go get it.
The benefit of all this is that, backing into cancer again, is that if we know early enough, then maybe we have a good fighting chance of being able to do something about it. Yeah,
that is going to be the solution to the war on cancer. We're going to be able to detect it because right now, the only way you can detect cancer is basically the best way and the gold standard is a PET scan. But to see it, you need 1 trillion cells minimum to be able to get that thing to fluoresce on a PET scan. So at 1 trillion cells, you already have, quite a bit of cancer. We need to be able to see 100,000 or 50,000. And that's going to come in the form of a liquid biopsy. A lot of people are working on that. And I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see some very interesting work in that regard.
We need to die from something, right? Something's gonna catch us.
Yeah.
I guess it's hard to tell what would be the best thing to die from. But I've heard some people say, that obviously you don't get to pick, but some people, have kind of pointed out like everyone's so fearful of a heart attack, but that most of us are going to die like either from that or some other weird complication. So, people are, I think what you said about people maybe focused in on some of the wrong things, you're not going to be able to stop heart disease.
You can.
100%, you think?
I mean, look, again, we're totally in the realm of opinion. I think that you basically have growth processes and repair, and you've got damage processes. And I think that the machinery could be pushed a lot further if we understood it. I think that diagnostics are going to change. Like, I think, here we're having a conversation 50 years from now, people are going to laugh saying, oh my God, those guys had no idea. I mean, think about this. When you started in 1994, I think was when you first did your diet, you couldn't even have tested your ketones in blood. And right. I remember the first time I tested my blood glucose, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is the secret to everything. And now I can actually predict within usually like 1/10 of a millimole what my ketone level is. And that's one kind of.
You can like feel it.
I can kind of feel it. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's
That's very nerdy.
It's very nerdy. Yeah. A few years ago, I had never measured my ketones. So the testing's going to get better and better. There's going to be urine tests. There's going to be things where you're really going to be able to see, because I find it when it's kind of like a video game. When you get instant feedback, it makes sense. Like, you eat
your health meter. That's what we need. We need to be walking around with a health meter
right.
over our head.
Yeah, like
all the time. Well, a health bar.
Here's a crazy
It'd be cool
fact.
during UFC fights.
It would be. That's right. Peter Attia actually has an implantable glucose monitor that he wears 24/7, and what he watches how everything he eats. So he put us to the test at the office it's going back about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. And he would, if he eats a burger and fries, he gets a very different blood glucose spike than if he eats steak and eggs. And it made a big, big difference. And he would actually see, hey, this is how food impacts me. And once
it's like
you can see it,
in his body or something, connected to him somehow?
Yeah. So the only one they have now, Dexcom makes it. They use it for type 1 diabetics because they have to be very careful. But it's basically a tiny little needle that he puts in like on his oblique area. And then he tapes over it to make sure it doesn't come out because, obviously if you get dressed or turn around or even just do a twist. And then it goes to his phone and it allows you to see what's going on. And I actually met with Dexcom trying to get them to add ketones to it. Because then you could imagine the war on carbs. You want to talk about diagnostics for that. You would literally see, oh my God, I can tell what that cheesecake did to me. Whereas when I did the coffee fast, my blood glucose was super low.
We don't need fucking technology. We need to just not eat carbs.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally correct. You don't have to be like a super nutritional geek. But when you see it, it does. For some people, it's like, whoa.
No, it helps to know. It helps to know what's going on inside of your body. Do you still test ketones and stuff, like just kind of a personal curiosity, or is it something that's like part of your nutrition plan in some way?
I used to test. I was probably doing 30 readings a day sometimes. If you were to come into the R&D department at Quest, there was a time if you looked in the trash can, the amount of blood and strips was, disgusting or inspiring depending how you looked at it.
Yeah.
So we were really geeking out on it. I probably test a few times a week, especially if I did something different to see, hey, what's going on. But I can kind of tell where my ketones and I can tell ketones. I can't really predict blood glucose very well. Sometimes it's much higher than I think, and That
What
really
about
goes
the
up and down.
A1C? A lot of people are making a thing of that. Does it seem like a big?
So here's the thing about A1C. A1C, okay, here's what I will say for sure. For diabetics, it works really well. A1C works on a scale of something between, you might see it as low as 3 to, 25. Between 6 and 6.5 is considered pre-diabetic. If it's 6.5 or above, it's considered diabetic. And I would say from 6 and above, it works super, super well. You can actually just go to Amazon and you get something called an A1C now, and you can get two tests. You get one test kit, but it lets you take 2 readings. And it tells you essentially the amount of glycation that's happened to your red blood cell, meaning how much of your red blood cell has been cooked by the glucose in your bloodstream. So have you ever taken your HA1C by chance?
I've had it tested before, yeah.
So yours, I'd guess, by the way you eat, is probably between 4.6 and 6 for sure. But it seems to me from the research that I've been doing on a lot of different people, it doesn't work. It's not as accurate as you get lower down the scale. It seems to have that sweet spot for pre-diabetes and diabetes. But I always compete with my wife. She's gotten hers as low as 4.9. I've never cracked 5. But I know other people that eat terrible diets just recently, and they're in like the 4.6, 4.5 range. So I hope it's not away from me.
What was your prediction on mine?
Oh, yours? I'm going to guess yours is 5.6.
It's 5.6.
There you go. Yeah. So
mine is like, I guess according to the information I have here, it's a little bit high, right?
Well, here's the problem. If we looked at your fasting insulin, one of the things that's out there.
So my fasting insulin was really good. It was like super low.
Yeah. So here's what I think's happening. Mathematically, they figure that your red blood cell is going to live 120 days, and they use that as the math. The problem is, I think the way you eat, your red blood cells live a little longer, so they pick up more glycation.
That's right, motherfuckers.
Yeah, so
my red blood cells are living on. I can feel it.
You got to be careful because you can fool yourself with this stuff. It's kind of like, hey, my numbers aren't where I want them. Maybe it's because of this or that. But I do think we're working right now on canine with dogs, with the Ketopet dogs. And our dogs, so here's what's interesting. Our dogs run their average blood glucose for all the thousands of readings we did, non-postprandial, meaning not after a meal, they were running about 60. The dogs that were fed normal diets, kibble or regular dog food, they were running 93. So that's a 50% delta, 50% difference. So an HA1C basically is the average of your blood sugar for the last 120 days, more heavily weighted toward the last couple of months, but it should correlate. And I would guess your blood sugar with the way you eat, your HA1C should be lower than 5.6. And I actually think the test just isn't that accurate. I've been working with a lot of people that eat super low carb diets. It just seems like once you get north of 6, it's very accurate. But once you get below 6, I think it's questionable. So I'm looking at it. We'll know in the next few months, probably.
What are some other things you think are important to test? You've tested everything, so. Well,
it's funny. It's amazing. I've actually learned just a lot about this recently. I've tested a lot of things. Let's see. Obviously you've got hormone panels, and that depends obviously for males and females that can go over. Thyroid is a tricky one because a lot of people say, low carb diets suppress your thyroid. Well, does it suppress your thyroid or does it normalize it? I think your thyroid probably does run a little lower when you're eating low carbs, but I have a feeling that's the way it's supposed to be. And obviously
that might be like a bowel movement as well. Like people are always like, man, I can't take a shit for nothing. But it's like, well, you cleaned up your diet a lot, so maybe you shouldn't be on the toilet as much.
Yeah. That's very possible.
And when it comes to testing all these different things, I get a lot of questions about it all the time. And, the first thing people ask me every time is, doing the carnivore diet, they want to know what's your cholesterol, which I find interesting that they want to know your blood work right away when you mention that you're on a diet, as opposed to like, no one ever talks about blood work otherwise.
Yeah.
It's like, man, people are eating really, really poorly all the time.
Yeah.
And those people are getting their blood work done. A lot of times it's us guys that are dieting are meatheads.
Eat the steak. That steak.
Yeah. You're going to be like, what are there some precautions though with some of the food that we're ingesting?
Are there any precautions? Here's the thing. If you look, the Paleolithic argument is you go back before 11,000 years, before agriculture existed, what were we eating? We were eating meat. meat and some vegetables, but not really starchy vegetables. I saw a thing recently that you can Google it, where they were showing what vegetables looked like before agriculture. And if you look at vegetables or fruit nowadays, they're completely different. They've been so crossbred that, if you ever eaten an apple in nature, it barely has any sweetness. If you ever eaten a strawberry in the field, it tastes more like water, maybe a tiny touch of sweetness. But you go to the supermarket and you eat a strawberry, it's like a candy bar. So same with corn. If you look at what corn used to look like a long time ago, it had like a little bit here or there, a couple of kernels. But now that these things are, ripe, plump with sugar. So I think all of our ancestors were just the amount of available carbohydrate was much, much lower.
We're kind of screwed when it comes to food in a lot of ways, because even a cow is like an animal that came from something else, right? Like even a cow, like 10,000 years ago, they kind of bred it as food for us.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. But if you look at just pretty much all mammals and you look at their muscle tissue, it all kind of comes around the same. Even the fat composition. Like a lot of people think, I got you. Fats, there's a ton of saturated fat. Well, remember, the primary fat in beef or any red meat is almost always monounsaturated. So there is saturated fat, but usually it's like 45% mono and then 40 or less % saturated. So you're right that they have been messing around with that in agriculture, but I don't think it's as big of a deal in meats. I'll say this, if you look at a bison 10,000 years ago versus a cow today, it's not nearly as different as a stalk of corn or something like that. That's a huge, or fruit for sure.
For yourself, in all this testing, have you noticed any difference in eating vegetables versus not eating vegetables?
Surprisingly, no. You'd think, I used to always make sure, I got all my vegetables, but lately I've been playing with less and less. If anything, I've gotten leaner. I mean, for sure. And it seems like,
and then health markers?
No,
Same-ish?
Yeah. The biggest things that I think really make a difference is inflammatory markers tell you, hey, something's going on. And once they get so low, it's kind of tough to really, unless obviously if you did something and they went back the other way.
Right.
But no, I haven't seen any smoking gun that you can say, hey, look at this. I think that inflammatory markers are great as a first place for people to look at, just because that sleep can influence that, diet can influence that. And there's a guy named Jack Cruz who wrote a book called Epipaleo RX, and he's looking at things like what type of polyunsaturated fat, like the amount of 6:3 in your cell membranes. That's another thing that you can look at. Really they're looking for like a 4:1 or less ratio in your cell membrane. So four parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3.
People are always saying that we need vegetables. You need them to be healthy. You need them to go to the bathroom. We need the fiber. Do we really need that?
I think the answer there is, a lot of people would try to kill me for this, but probably not. And if you think about it, I think all of our ancestors, certainly if you have, like, you've got light eyes, and so your ancestors definitely
Thank you for noticing.
Your ancestors certainly spent more time in the cold probably than mine did. And I think if you come from the cold, during the winter,
Ron's eyes are pitch black.
People were eating pure meat. Here's the crazy thing: if I were to give you a piece of paper and I said, "Hey, Mark, I'm going to put you in the hold of my ship for 4 years. You can write one food down, and that's all you're going to eat for the next 4 years. Your mission is to arrive not only alive in port 4 years from now, but in better shape than you are now." What would you write down?
Doritos. 100%.
Well, there you go, and you would be dead. And the crazy thing is, you basically have two choices. You've got some sort of meat, red meat, could be seal meat, bison, anything that has enough fat, or eggs. Anything other than that, there's no single food you could subsist on. And does that mean that we should only be eating that food? No, of course not. But I think it's pretty interesting that meat, like for example, people say, what about vitamin C? You're going to die of vitamin C deficiency. And that's not true. I mean, the Chinese spent months and months at sea, but they had access to they had these huge wide ships, and they had access to fresh meat.
Right.
And as long as you have access to meat, you'll never get scurvy. You'll never get vitamin C deficiency.
Well, also too, according to Dr. Baker, obviously he's got his own agenda going on with his carnivore diet, but he's pointed out that they just have said that there's no vitamin C at all in meat, but he says that there is. He says they just say that it's 0%, but he's like, there's not a lot, but there's small amounts of vitamin C. So we just, it's hard to really know like what the hell it is we're being told sometimes.
Yeah, and the good news is it's all measurable. I mean, sometimes like the vitamin C thing, you think about it, we're made of meat. So, and we have vitamin C in us, obviously. So if you eat us or meat, you're essentially getting some of that. But it is strange how it seems like when the British went to eating hardtack, which is basically like a carb cracker, that's when they got scurvy. And if your carbs are low, your vitamin C requirements are definitely lower. And there's lots of people who have gone decades eating just meat and they never get scurvy.
What's the deal with vegetables? Like, in a supermarket, they put all kinds of, like, I've heard they put weird stuff on them. They put like collagen, or they put plastics on them to help them last longer shelf lives and stuff. Have you heard anything about any of that?
I do know of, I read, God, you're reminding me. Yeah, a few years ago, they were putting like some sort of polymer on it. I remember reading about it. It didn't seem like it was anything troubling, because I remember it was like a food grade polymer, but it did keep basically it stopped as much oxygen exchange, which really probably isn't a bad idea. I know people get freaked out.
Right.
But there could be other things they're using that we don't know. I'm just talking about one in particular.
Yeah. So that brings up another good point. I mean, sometimes some of these things, they might be dangerous in some ways, but they might be beneficial in others.
They may. And one of the things you got to think about is it's the whole Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. Like, people focus so much on like these tiny pieces of it, but their macros are totally out of whack, or they're not paying attention to the types of fats they're eating. So those are the big places to focus on. And if that's all clear, then in your nutritional geek, yeah, you can go and focus on what the vegetables are sprayed on. But all of this stuff should be measurable, and a lot of these things they aren't. So they can't be too crazy important compared to other things that have huge, like inflammatory markers.
How do you have time for all this? It seems like you're into a lot of different things. You got your hands in a lot of different things. You mentioned to me that you read a lot. You read like sometimes 4 hours a day.
Yeah, I like to read, and reading is like, man, you're transported to another place. So I read all the time on my phone.
Like a lifetime student.
Yeah, learning is really what it's about, and I think it just depends on what you read. Like, you could, like Facebook, for example. I'm not a huge Facebook fan because people are controlling the information that they're presenting. So usually I'm researching something, and then that clicks into something else, and that clicks into something else, and you got 15 browsers open.
So you're not on social media that much.
I use Instagram because I learn about stuff. I think that's great. I'm totally, social media has been really important for the growth of the business. I don't spend a lot of time Facebook in particular. Just that's me. I know people who, a lot of it is Instagram. You basically build a community based on what you're interested in. So it's very relevant. And I know with Facebook, you could do the same thing. Like, hey, I'm only going to basically link up with people that are of mindsets that I'm interested in. But Facebook, because it tends to be more social, a lot of times, like, hey, it's like you're just seeing kind of crap.
We got a pretty good question on the chat room over here. We have a 48-year-old police officer. He's been working at graveyard shift for years. He's wondering, should he be eating like breakfast when he gets off work, which is usually about 1 p.m. That's when he wakes up. So should he be eating like a typical breakfast when he's waking up at his random hours, or should he just be focusing on just eating clean?
Wow, this is an interesting question that we can.
He's getting plenty of sleep. So I asked him, he says he's getting about 7 hours of sleep after kids and family stuff. But he is also curious, like, should he be training like a normal person?
Well, I know what Mark's going to say. Mark's going to say, get divorced, stop being a cop, stop seeing your kids, and train all the time, which I think is very bad advice. But
luckily you're here.
Get your ass in the gym.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. His question was, should he be eating? So one thing that's really cool, you touch a lot on this, Mark, in War on Carbs, is the whole concept of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is something a lot of people have heard about. They're kind of confused. So two things I'll say on that, which will ultimately come back to his question. Mm-hmm. You can take two groups of rats. Well, I'll step back one more time. The only thing that probably everybody can agree on in nutrition, there's probably only one thing that I can think of, and that's caloric restriction. And caloric restriction has been done on rats. It's been done in primates. It's been done in lizards. It's been done in yeast. It's been done in flatworms. Not only has it been done across the board just about on every animal, it's also been replicated time and time again. So you've got lots of different researchers at different universities, and pretty much they realize if they subtract about 20 to 30% of the calories of an animal, it lives longer. And if you look at the late stage animals, they look like the young ones. And that's I think, very well established. Now, somebody then said, well, wait a minute, what happens if I feed an animal whatever it wants today, nothing the next day, whatever it wants the third day, nothing the fourth day? Well, the animal's not dumb. It doubles its caloric intake on the days it can eat. So it's not caloric restricted, but it has the same benefits of caloric restriction, which means it's not the calories. It's actually the time periods without food. So just 2 weeks ago, I was reading an article about Huntington's disease. Huntington's is like the classic genetic disease. If either your mom or your dad has the allele for it.
It's kind of a rare disease, right?
It's pretty rare, but it's not super, super rare. Like you don't hear about it. And the reason it's used as the classic genetic disease is if you get one, if either of your parents have it, you've got a 50% chance. And if you have it, you will die pretty much at the same age your parents died. Now I use this because what they did is they then started intermittent fasting these rats. And they noticed that just by changing the eating period, so the two groups of rats were eating the same thing, but the one group was getting it, their fasting period was longer. They were measuring the markers, the disease progression was much slower just by changing the eating window. So I think the question this police officer is asking is a good one because, he's not, he's awake at night, which is tough because, the light, the circadian rhythm is screwed up there. But should he be eating breakfast? I think the most important, he could eat breakfast or he could eat dinner. One of the things I know, you do like a 16-8. Is that what when you intermittent fast?
I use a lot of intermittent fasting, but I don't try to put an exact clock on it. I know that there's some research that shows if you go longer, you get a little bit more benefit. But I also am a believer in stress. And so I don't like to over stress myself on anyone. I don't want to be I can't eat yet. If it's time to eat, I'll be like, okay, that's time I'm going to eat. Yeah. I think for this guy, a really simple thing is just when you're home, eat, because it's just easier to cook and prepare food.
Yeah. And so, in his case, one of the things you might want to consider, he may want to consider, so a 16-8 means you're going to fast for 16 hours, 8 hours of which you're going to be asleep. So that really means you only have 8 hours of not eating. And then all of your meals are going to be consumed in an 8-hour window. A lot of us come from the fitness orthodoxy that said, hey, carry a cooler around. If you don't eat 6 times a day, you're destroying your metabolism. Don't skip meals. I did that for 13 years and I believe that. And now I think it's pretty clear, 2 years ago, there was a breast cancer study that came out. Women who had a 13-hour or less fasting period had a 36% increased chance of getting breast cancer again.
Wow.
So there's something magical about periods without food. So for this police officer, I think the most important thing isn't so much when he eats, it's how much time he has between meals. So, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but smashing your eating window together, you really want to make sure that for a good 16 hours is a good number. You can go, some people go 24, meaning 20 hours of fasting, 4 hour, all their meals are eaten in that 4 hour window. I think that's probably the most important thing. And a lot of people get leaner just from that. They just find, wow, I didn't do anything different. I didn't change what I ate. I just smashed my eating window. When I first started intermittent fasting, one thing you say in the book, which I thought was really smart, don't start intermittent fasting right away. Usually you go keto, because the first time I fasted, I was like, this feels terrible. I have a headache.
People start it all right away.
They do it all right away. And the problem is
calorie deficit, intermittent fasting. I'm going to train. I'm going no carbs. Man, you just really threw a lot of stuff at yourself.
That's right. When I first keto adapted, it took me a long time because I was still addicted to glucose. My body was screaming for it. So I got headaches. I felt terrible. And that's the first
step. Look at you now.
Oh, yeah. So to finish up there, I think that focusing on macronutrients, getting into a ketogenic state is the first step. And then you can play with intermittent fasting. And I think that how he does his fasting window is more important than whether he eats breakfast or night. It's just, you need 16 hours is a good number.
Have you seen studies on intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet? Have you seen anything about that? Because I think I've never personally tried intermittent fasting without being on a ketogenic diet, but I also have a hard time understanding how well it would work. I'm not saying that it wouldn't work in the same way, and I'm not thinking that you would lose a lot of muscle or anything, but man, having those glucose spikes up and down and craving carbohydrates, I think would make it that much harder.
I totally agree. I think you put your finger on it. I used to say that the gateway to intermittent fasting or fasting of any kind is keto. If you try to fast when you're still glucose addicted, it's brutal. I remember the first few times I fasted, I thought, this is a terrible idea. And then once I went keto, I just kind of automatically ended up intermittent fasting. And that's what you find is people that are like, let's say, if they have a high percentage of carbs, they might eat 4, 5, 6 times a day. Once they keto adapt, and that can take a long time. Like you talk about it in the book, it's not like 3 days. It could be weeks and weeks to get there to where you're feeling really, really good. All of a sudden people say, yeah, I'm eating about twice a day. I used to never forget to eat meals. I heard people say, oh, I forgot to eat today. I was like, wait a minute. I've got a clock in my head. I know exactly when my next meal is coming.
I used to think that was insane too. Somebody say I forgot to eat, I'd want to punch him. I'd be like, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my life.
I totally agree with you on that. And now I could easily forget. And also, if you don't have access to food, you might get a little hungry, but you don't get hangry. And it's big difference. When you're on carbs, it's like, man, you're feeling like you want to tear the wallpaper down to get to something. But yeah.
What was that weird noise?
I still get angry.
Jessica's saying she still gets a little hangry, but girls,
Some people when they're on a ketogenic diet, they'll talk about how they get like keto flu, and they get these different kind of side effects of kind of starting up a ketogenic diet. And you mentioned yourself it was difficult. What's something somebody can do in the first couple of days that they get on a ketogenic diet to maybe help avoid that a little bit? Yeah.
So this is something that I didn't fully appreciate till I did put a lot of other people on ketogenic diets. Salt, which you talk about in the book. Mm-hmm. And then you can do potassium and magnesium. And if you want to cover your bases, you really have to really heavily salt your food. I actually, there's a guy named Jamie Caporoso. Do you know him? Has he ever been on your show?
I do not know. No.
He's a good guy to get on your show. He told me he has something called keto paleo. He's a power lifter. He's always at the shows, very interested in nutrition, et cetera. And he told me, Ron, you should be salting your food more. And I usually, when I hear something, if it sounds interesting, I do it. For some reason, I didn't do this for about like 2 years. And he said, if you're super low carb, he said, before you go in the gym, if you salt your food, you basically it feels like you have more to push against. It's not quite like a pump. So anyway, I started doing it, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, because you're not holding on any water. So when you're keto, even though I was way past the keto flu. So keto flu is something that happens usually for the first few weeks when people first start keto adapting, and you should focus on sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And you can just go to a store and just get those supplements, but salt your food heavily and then take potassium, magnesium. That's how you get rid of it.
Have you heard about any particular recommendations on how much?
I'll tell you a book that does a good job. I don't know if have you read the Ketogenic Bible?
I have
Yeah. So Ketogenic Bible is a great book. I've recommended a lot. People ask me all the time, and I was like, I don't read it. I don't read the basic stuff anymore.
It's insane how much information's in there. That
book is insane. It pretty much covers everything, and it's the book that I've been kind of recommending lately, just because people, if you can read it from cover to cover if you're a nutrition geek, and you can just dip into the section, and they talk about Keto Flu. They talk about all the research.
I looked at it a lot, in writing the War on Carbs, because I was like, I don't know, I don't want to say the wrong shit,
It's interesting. The War on Carbs and the Ketogenic Bible are kind of opposite books. The War on Carbs you can read and you're on your way in, 10 minutes if you read really fast, or a couple hours if you read really slowly. And it's there. You can, every page is what you need to go. The Ketogenic Bible goes to the other degree.
It goes deep, and that's when I was inspired by the book, because I was like, I want to go the complete opposite direction that they went in. They did such a good job covering everything. I'm like, I don't even know this information. Like I've been on a ketogenic diet for a long time. I don't know half the information that these guys know that they put in this book, and it's amazing. It has a lot of great info. But as I was looking at it, and as I was digging through the science and the history, I'm like, I don't truly know that. I do know what I know, and I'm going to write about that.
Well, it's interesting. You're making me think about it. The two books are very similar and on opposite ends of the spectrum at the same time. Like if your goal is to be able to do this stuff, the War on Carbs you're going to be able to read it, and obviously referencing it, you can go back through. And I love the way you did that, like the coffee fasting, something we both do a lot of.
Yep.
And the way you just showed how your week looks with a visual graphic. The Ketogenic Bible is for someone that, hey, they're getting peppered with questions. They want to understand the science more. That's there. But that's.
Let's talk a little bit about the keto there, the coffee fast.
Yep.
How do you do it?
Well, I've never really been a huge coffee drinker. I don't feel coffee, so I don't get any stimulants.
Indestructible. Some people, how does that work? Some people just like don't break down the caffeine enzyme or something like that, right?
I think it's the opposce. So if you get 23andMe,
metabolize it or something, right?
Yeah, you metabolize it super fast. So
Okay.
23andMe is something you can get. It's a buccal swab. You just basically stick a Q-tip in your mouth, send them the thing, and there's a genetic test, and they'll come back and they'll give you a lot of information on your DNA. They don't tell you much about it because the FTC or the FDA, I think, or maybe both of them said, hey, you're making too many claims. So they had to really back down what they were saying. But there's a section in there that shows you what type of metabolizer of caffeine you are. You can be like a CC, which is a very slow metabolizer, a CT or a TC, which is kind of in the middle, and you can be a TT. I happen to be a TT, which is why if I drink coffee, I don't feel that I can go right to sleep afterwards. Also, if I drink coffee for 9 months and stop, I don't get a headache. I don't notice caffeine. So for me, it's just, especially when it's cold, I like to drink it, but I could take it or leave it. But I find that it's amazing for appetite suppression. And the one thing I think everybody can agree on is if you can get control of your calories, that's a great place to be. So the way I use it, I use either butter or cream, sometimes MCT or some of the MCT powder. And I just use it in the morning, and then I won't eat till noon or 1 or 2, depending on how long of a fasting window. If my last meal was at 6 p.m., I can easily get 16 hours in. And I think the way you said it is really good, because it's basically, you call it a coffee fast or a fat fast. You are taking fat, and people say, well, wait a minute, I thought a fast meant you're not eating anything, and that's technically true. But when you're not eating anything that can convert to glucose, meaning carbs or protein, it's different. And I still think your fat burnings is super high, and you still feel kind of like euphoric a little bit because it feels just like you're fasting, but it does take an edge off the appetite a little bit. And I think it's a great technique.
In some weird way, it's almost like your body didn't truly register that you had a meal, because there's really, I could be saying this wrong, but I don't think there's anything that happens to your insulin or your glucose when you have just fat by itself. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's right. You can test it for yourself. Just get a blood sugar kit, and you can take a reading right before, take your coffee, take a couple others. You'll see fat is different than the other. I
remember when I first learned about the bulletproof coffee stuff, and having putting butter, MCT, coconut oil, whatever these combinations of things are in your coffee. And I remember the first thing that came in my mind, and it actually ended up being something that kind of stuck with me forever, was I was like, that's disgusting, and I can see how it would make you not want to eat. And I think that's a kind of forgotten thing about that particular thing. Now, some people might think it tastes good and whatever, but it is a weird combination. It's a weird combination for somebody to kind of take on. And I was like, that's kind of disruptive to your stomach in a lot of ways.
I totally forgot that. But when I first heard about butter in your coffee, I had that same reaction. I've forgotten because I love it so much now.
Yeah, I like it too.
But that's a good point. I do remember getting that kind of like, that's I had forgotten about that.
In some weird way, it's kind of like somebody gets a bodybuilding diet, and the coach is like, yeah, go ahead, eat as much tilapia as you want. It's like, who really enjoys tilapia that much?
That's right. That's exactly right. It has it, yeah.
And so I think it has a satiating factor to it because of that partially, and then also I think you do get used to it. What about bone broth? Have you messed around with bone broth at all?
Why are you interested in bone broth?
I love bone broth. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, but it's just something that kind of came up that has been part of the food selection that I've kind of boiled everything down to, I guess. Rob Wolf had this kind of elimination diet where you eliminate a lot of stuff from your diet. I started playing around with that years ago, and then also in doing the war on carbs, and in venturing into the carnivore diet. The bone broth was something that kind of stuck around. I do remember years ago, when I first started to learn about collagen protein, they were like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. And then all of a sudden it fell out of favor, and it was the worst thing ever. And I know that collagen protein, I don't think has a great amino acid profile or anything like that. And some people will say it's completely useless for muscle building and whatever. I actually like the bone broth. Hopefully it's not doing anything detrimental to me. How you're going to tell me coming up here. It's not going to make me grow tits or anything like that. But I really enjoy it. A lot of times I'll mix some heavy cream in there or some butter or something like that. And so for me, it's something I usually add to. I have it with a meal. Sometimes I'll have it at night. I think having something hot, I think helps you with controlling your foods, controlling the amount of calories you're taking in. And so that's the reason why I utilize it.
So this is something I've thought a lot about. I've read a lot about. I'm actually thinking about it right now. I can tell you just things that I've thought about. I really don't have an answer on this, but people think, hey, our connective tissue is made of collagen. Therefore, take collagen and your connective tissue will be better. And they've even studied it. And, Carl Lenore from Superhuman Radio, you've heard of him? You don't know him?
I don't know him personally.
Oh my God.
No, never met him.
He's amazing. Oh yeah, he's amazing. You definitely want to. I got to introduce you. He's
cool.
really, really a cool guy. He actually had a guy on who did research on basically jumping rope, and they were looking at collagen and how it would repair connective tissue. Here's the interesting thing: if you take somebody who has scurvy, their teeth are falling out of their mouth, their connective tissue is completely broken, and if you feed them hundreds of pounds of collagen, what happens to their scurvy? Does it get better? No. So when you eat that collagen, you break it down to its constituent amino acids, and then you have to rebuild your own collagen. And if you don't have vitamin C, you can't do it. So clearly, eating collagen to improve your own collagen is not a simple equation of, you are what you eat. Not really. You basically eat something, convert it to amino acids, and you might rebuild it into that, or you may not. So I'm a little bit skeptical of collagen because you're correct. Basically, we eat protein for a lot of reasons, but 4 amino acids in particular. You got your methionine, which is how you make IGF-1, and you're probably interested in that because you can grow on that. Then you got your 3 branch chains. Those are the 3 amino acids, as well as others that are super low in collagen. So no one's going to argue that collagen is some amazing source. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to have to eat a lot more calories to get the amino acids. And so bone broth may have other benefits. I think the warm thing you said, absolutely. I think we were talking about that earlier, how that can suppress appetite in and of itself more than like a cold drink. And Jamie Caparoso, the guy that I mentioned earlier, that's actually how he would get his salt in with bone broth and things like that.
Right.
I just think that you got to be careful thinking that, I know collagen is the hot rage right now. And as a product formulator, I can tell you collagen is an amazing protein. It's so easy to work with. You can put it in your coffee. It goes into solution, but it's not a great protein source.
Right.
So I don't use bone broth. If there's other things, because I think marrow is different. So there's, bone broth actually is more than just collagen. Straight collagen, I think, is more questionable. Bone broth with some of the marrow and the fat, that's very different. That could be very interesting, because if you look at ancient people, they wouldn't eat the muscle meat. They wouldn't get the steak. They'd go right for like the liver. They'd go right for the intestines, and they would break bones and suck out the marrow. So
bone broth is definitely a really weird thing. Like there's some bone broth in this grocery store that's just on the shelf in a regular spot, and there's some that's refrigerated. The ones that are refrigerated have like coagulated fat on it, and the ones that are on the shelf don't really have any fat. So it's like, I'm not sure, which one does what, but it sounds like that makes some sense. The one that has the gelatins and the different things in it might be more beneficial in some way.
Yeah, well, actually, I'd say the ones that have the fat, because they're going to need to be refrigerated because they're going to go rancid. Right. So the ones that are on the shelf are going to be more collagen, and the ones that are going to be bone broth that have like the coagulated stuff that you were talking about, that's almost certainly going to have more fat. It will rot. So from a nutrition standpoint, I mean, that's going to get you something very different than just the straight collagen.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever done in terms of nutrition? Because there's this is a weird rabbit hole we go down in terms of not nutrition, but in terms of your health, period.
I could probably write a book on it, but the first one that came to mind, do you remember Cybergenics? You're pretty young, so you may not remember Cybergenics.
Dude, don't come at me like that, bro. Of course I remember fucking Cybergenics. Kidding me? Well, I'm so sore from that shit.
Well, if you remember Cybergenics, do you remember it was basically there was 2 days.
It was a program and a supplement regimen as well.
It was. And if you remember, there's one of the strangest things about Cybergenics is that you were not allowed to drink any water that wasn't room temperature.
Cybergenics. God damn. Bringing back some memories.
And the first 2 days you were supposed to eat twice your BMR in pure protein. That means you could eat egg whites or egg whites. I mean, because you
can
couldn't
I
have any
just say?
fat.
Can I just say this? I'm glad that we're out of the egg white era.
Me too. And that was one
I
of the
think most
things-
of us are, at least anyway.
Yeah.
Shit, man, that was a tough
It
time.
was
We went through
super
some
tough
rough
time.
times.
I could never get enough down. I couldn't do my BMR, let alone twice my BMR in pure protein.
Oh, there it is. Cybergenics, he found it. Oh, he found like
Wow.
a video on it. Wow, good job,
That's
Andrew.
an old. Can you name the male spokes, or the male model for who Cybergenics was?
I don't think I'm going to get it right. I'll make a guess. I'll say Rich Gaspari. I don't know.
Franco Santoriello.
Oh, there we go. I don't know. I knew I was going to be off on that.
Yeah, no, that was quite some time ago.
Damn, Cybergenics. Anyway, go back to your Cybergenics story.
So that was one of the weirdest things, trying to eat. So you take your BMR, which, I don't know, 2,200 calories.
This
whatever it was.
commercial's fantastic.
It is.
The guy with the long hair. Was that you, Ron?
No.
Damn,
I thought it was Fabio. I thought it was
you look
Fabio for a
great
second, but it
in your-
wasn't. No.
You look great in your 20s, Ron.
No, let me say I did not.
Oh, this is great. Now, I wonder why you and I tried it. Is that Michael
Can you
Hearn?
name that? Can you name that guy? Actually?
No, I cannot name that
Oh my
guy.
gosh.
I'm not I'm not a crazy bodybuilding nut. You know that guy? Who that guy is?
I actually do. Yeah.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah. Okay. Next, moving on.
Yeah.
Roger Stewart.
Roger
He
Stewart.
was known for his calves. Yeah.
Oh,
He was out of Florida.
So according
Nice.
to the commercial, his name is Joe Babix.
his success story.
Oh, you know
That's-
what's funny? It's
this
a little grainy, but I
Oh,
was
the
gonna
pixels.
Like
Joe
Oh,
Babbitt.
you know what?
Before
No,
and
yeah,
after.
yeah. Well, he
Mm.
looks a lot like Roger Stewart.
Mm.
Well, it might be him, but
Bring
in the
up
commercial-
Roger
in the
Stewart.
commercial.
Let's
Yeah.
bring up Roger Stewart's calves so we
There
can get
you
to the
go.
bottom. Get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, you just type in Roger Stewart calves and bam, I'm sure it'll be.
Back to the Cybergenic story. I'm sorry. I keep
It's
cutting
actually
you
EWART. Yeah, the Cybergenics, you had to eat 2 times your BMR, so about 4,000 calories in just egg whites.
off. Holy
And we tried it for a few weeks, and we were never able to, and just got super, super sick.
There's
Yeah,
those
there it is.
calves.
Yeah. That's
Inch
what
on the arms in one day. You've done that workout before?
I've done that workout. Yes, never got an inch in my arms in one day.
What was the protocol that went into that inch on the arms in one day?
It was basically it was 2 sets every hour, so one for tricep, one for bicep, and you had to just rotate through. There's lots of different ones on the internet, but that was just craziness.
I think we need to have a day here at Super Training that's like that. What I remembered about that is it involved a lot of food.
It did involve a lot of food.
It
Yeah.
involved tremendous amounts of food. You had to every time you worked out, you had to eat as well.
Actually, yeah, that's what came later. The one I didn't really talk about food.
Oh,
So I basically did all the sets,
got
didn't eat,
screwed.
and I didn't gain. And it was before I knew anything about nutrition. Yeah, and it did not work at all.
you didn't have version 2.0 going on.
I got very sore, and that's all I got out of it.
Oh my
And
God!
it lasted.
Anything else crazy that you've done health wise, or anything weird? Like, do you get weird about like your Wi-Fi, and do you get weird about chemicals in your food, and just
Blue light.
you
And
like
all that stuff.
like
you
would
want to
you
get weird?
would you
Okay.
eat a burger from like In-N-Out, or just never under any circumstances
Yeah,
would you?
so I am definitely not that weird guy. I research that stuff and I think about it, but here are a couple things. I think that grass-fed versus non-grass-fed, it's measurable, the difference. Like I was just reading about it on the plane, actually, coming over here. There's the amount of polyunsaturated fat in grass-fed beef in this particular study was like 2% if it came from grass-fed, and it was about 4% if it came from commercially fed. So, and the omega-6 and 3 changes a little bit, but it's not a big deal. So yeah, I'll eat burgers at McDonald's. I think that's perfectly fine. What was the other thing you said? You got me thinking about something.
I asked you about blue light and that sort of thing.
So I've got a screen protector on my phone right now.
Mhm.
This actually blocks out 90% of blue light because, one thing I didn't realize how much research there is. I have a red light machine. Have you ever done that?
Mm-mm.
So you might be interested in this. They've actually done a lot of studies with animals, et cetera. So red light, you get red light from the sun, and red light actually goes into your skin, and infrared goes into your mitochondria and actually has effects there. And there's people that have been playing with increasing their testosterone levels by shining red light on their scrotum. So you can get a red light
Andrew?
machine.
I need some red lights.
Well, you actually, this would be really interesting. I think you should buy one here at Super Training. Take everybody's.
Scrotum.
No, don't take their scrotum. Take their baseline testosterone level and take their free test. Do all that. Then make them every day. They have to do 20 minutes a day of exposure to the red light in every room. Just block off a room here.
Is this red light like a flashlight or like a gun? Like, can we shoot each other?
No. Well, there's a lot of red light devices. The one I have is a panel.
Red light district.
But it's really red and infrared. And
Gotcha.
you just need to stand about 6 inches away from it. You can read about it.
Does your
online
wife know
and see.
about this?
My wife uses red light.
Oh, my
Yeah,
God.
she actually posted on Instagram a lot. And people are like, what the hell is that? But red light directly, it actually affects, the respiratory complexes in your mitochondria and interferes with nitric oxide in your, breaks it off with cytochrome C oxidase. So, people have really looked at it. And I actually think, red light, blue light doesn't matter. The big thing that most people think of is if you have a lot of blue light at night, it keeps you awake and you don't sleep as well. And that's something that I'd say is a little bit out there that I've looked at, and that really does hold up. I had a guy come out to my house recently and do an EMF screen. There's 4 different types of EMF radiation. I think that's kind of much ado about nothing for most people. Now, if you live in an apartment and you sleep, yeah, actually, there you go. That's actually one of the articles I was thinking about right there.
And that's Ben Greenfield.
It's actually...
It says the article. I think it's
article's
by.
That's funny. It's
He's
funny because
on
the guy
his way
who did
here
this
now.
to-
He's
Well,
actually
that's
here now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things. And I had this guy come in and checked out my house. And if you live in an apartment and your head is right next to what's called a like those power meters that they're constantly
gotcha.
Wi-Fi, it could have an effect because you got really strong magnetic fields. But in general, I think that people are terrified of EMF. And right now, I don't think that's, compared to so many other things to focus on, I don't think that's the place.
You got to live your life too, right? So what about, cheat meals and anything like that? Do you indulge here and there?
I think you said it really well. Cheat meal, you said it's not to raise your metabolism. It's not. Basically, cheat meals it's a social component. And I think the way you did it, I cheat the exact way you said it. I do fasts before and after. Like I used to think,
fast in, fast out.
Fast in, that's exactly right. And what that does is it lets you indulge a little bit and you don't get the damage of it. And one of the things we never think about is people think food has X impact on the human body. It doesn't. What state are you going into when you eat that? If you go run sprints and you train and you fast for 16 hours and then you eat a meal, it is completely different what's happening in your body than if you just walked out of Thanksgiving dinner and you're trying to stuff one more piece of pie in your mouth.
So Thorny on YouTube here, he wants to know, when are you training if you're, having these long periods of fat, without food? That's what we've been saying. But since you're fasting, when do you mix in your training?
Well, for me, I think that depends on when you're trying to gain muscle or not. So I'm not really trying to gain muscle. I still train for strength, but I train in the morning. I train fasted. And then depending what I trained, I will either intermittent fast till like noon, or I will sometimes eat, after. But if you're trying to get leaner, it's amazing. And I think it simplifies everything. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to add muscle, then intermittent fasting. There are some, groups out there like Lean Gains where they talk about it. It's probably going to be slower, but whatever you do put on, it's going to be muscle.
So the post-workout meal is not it's not important for you right now?
For me, no. But if I were trying to add muscle, I could do a post-workout meal. And then if I wanted to do, it's kind of weird. Would I intermittent fast if I were trying to add muscle? Probably not. Because, lipolytic enzymes and things like that are maximized on intermittent fasting.
Well, you bring up a good point. Like if you were still, you mentioned that you were very thin when you were young.
Yeah.
If you were still in that state, maybe you wouldn't have chose keto either.
It's interesting. Probably not. However, I will tell you this. I got fat when I put on muscle. And I think that if I had done it with keto, I would have put much less scale weight on as quickly. But it's pretty hard to get fat on keto. So, and whatever you do add, as long as your weights were still going up, the weights you're using in the gym, I think it's probably the most efficient way of putting super lean muscle on. However, I think you're going to hit a point of diminishing returns where
maybe low carb might have been a better lifestyle.
Carb, absolutely, yeah.
It keeps popping up on this show over and over again. The word control. it's everything. It's the hugest component. And I think what you did with the Quest bar and the Cheat Clean message that you guys have promoted, you guys now have the Quest cookies out. You guys make protein that you can cook with. I think it's great. You know, people ask me a lot of times about Ruled.me and some of these other things, these, you got Fathead Pizza, and you got these different versions of, you can make your own ice cream, keto. There's a lot of things that you can do that still fall into remaining in a ketogenic state. I have kind of often took the stance of, you know what, it's still kind of a cheat. Because I don't want people to get too used to these crazy bursting flavors over and over again to the point where that's where 90% of their focus is. I want their focus to be on things that aren't packaged, things that don't have labels on them. And yeah, occasionally you're going to eat some of these things to help keep you guided and to help keep you on track so you don't, jump ship completely and end up completely off your plan. And so I really liked... I've always liked the Quest bar. I've always liked a lot of the stuff that you guys are bringing into the picture, because it allows people. It's almost a friendlier way to say, hey, you know what? Come try some of this out. When you create something off of Ruled.me, a lot of the stuff tastes awesome. My wife has made keto cheesecake, and it tastes fantastic. We had a keto Super Bowl. We had all these different treats and all these different great things. What is some of your take on? I mean, I know that you sell a product that's kind of in this spot, but what is your take on some of these things?
Well, it's funny you say that because the original vision of Quest was the Super Bowl party that we could go to, where normally you go to a Super Bowl party, you eat nothing, and you just fast basically. Well, we wanted to go to a Super Bowl party where you had two tables, one where you had nachos and you had Oreos and everything. And you had another table right next to it that looked identical, tasted identical, but had completely different impact on your blood profile and your health. And that was really what Quest was trying to be, is how do we take foods that we love, but we just don't eat anymore? And, Quest existed at that nexus between being a foodie and being on a nutrition plan. And I think your point is really good because it's really scary for some people to say, so you're saying I'm never going to eat ice cream again? Yep, you're never going to eat it again. I'm never going to have a cookie again? Nope, never going to have a cookie. And even for guys like us, we do this all the time. It's not painful for me. It was at a time, but there's a guy in Los Angeles who made me this ice cream one time, and I still think about it. His name's Chris. Do you know this guy?
Is he not that tall?
He's a super nice guy, and he's like really, really into this stuff.
That keto ice cream.
Yeah, he made Keto Pro. You remember? Actually, you don't remember because you weren't there. And
I wasn't there.
I actually went out of my way. Bruce Cardenas was making a big deal of it. He said, you got to go try it. It was like, I don't know if it's maybe we've been doing this so long. It was like, wow, it's funny. I haven't had that in so long. And you want to talk about keeping people on the wagon. You have it, you indulge that, but you don't feel like you threw everything in the trash. A lot of people have a problem when they go and they eat Ben and Jerry's. Forget it. The whole weekend, now they just can't stop themselves. Yeah. So I do think food is such a weird thing. It's such a social construct for us. It brings us together. It's like, if we can share ice cream, if I can make it, you said Ruled.me, and I don't know if you've seen this stuff on like ketogenic.com. Mm-hmm. I don't know why you would eat a regular cheesecake, because cheesecake is one of the things you can make keto as good or better than the real thing. Other things, hey, they're you're not going to make a Dorito, not yet. Right. But that's something that there's no reason to eat. You can make keto cheesecake. You can give it to a child, which is the best thing. If you can trick them, then you got it made. So they're sort of the best because they're totally honest. They're like, oh, this is terrible.
Whenever people are like, oh, I love wine or I love beer, I'm like, try giving that to a kid.
Yeah.
They'll tell you how it tastes.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually taste good. You somewhere along the line convinced yourself that you like that. And there's other things going on other than you actually liking the flavor. I mean, I think the same thing with coffee. I don't truly enjoy the taste of coffee.
Do you drink alcohol?
I drink here and there, yeah.
You do. I thought, because it's like,
I mean, it's pretty rare. Like I don't enjoy the taste.
That's right.
I think maybe if I like the taste of it, maybe I would drink more, which is a good thing that I don't. But I've never really loved the flavor of it. And even with coffee, I mean, I mix coffee and I mix my Keto Pro in there, and I mix different things in there sometimes, and I can make it taste better. But
something else no one likes? Salad.
I know.
They like dressing. People
Right.
love dressing.
Yeah.
Oh, there's some salad there, but I've never seen rarely have I ever seen anyone eat a salad without dressing. So it's
well,
pretty
again,
crazy.
because a lot of people are desensitized to how things are supposed to taste. If you actually have abstained from eating a lot of junk and you have some spinach, it actually tastes pretty good. I know most people are listening. They're going, no, it doesn't taste good. Trust me.
Which is funny because you said in the book, when was the last time you heard someone say, I'm craving spinach?
Yeah.
And it's true. People say, I'm craving pizza, but.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about nutrition and we're talking about, a carnivore diet, people are like, well, all this red meat, this and that. And when you go to a restaurant, what's the most expensive thing they have on the menu?
Steak.
It's always steak. I mean, you're not going to get a, $95 plate of spaghetti and meatballs,
Very true.
And if you are, you're getting ripped off pretty bad. What are some things coming up for you guys? I know, at Quest, you guys are always trying to innovate and always trying to do new things.
The big thing now that's, we just came back from the Arnold Sports Festivals. It's the cookie. I mean, the cookie that's been a product. So, we've been kind of late to the game there. A lot of people have had cookies on the market for a long time. That was technically a lot more difficult than you'd think. It's basically got 4 net carbs per cookie. Just to get it to work,
What's a net carb?
A net carb is a carb. So fiber is considered a carbohydrate, which is technically chemically structured. That's true, but a net carb is a carb that you don't metabolize. So when you eat fiber, it goes into your stomach, it goes through your small intestine, and it gets fermented by bacteria in your large intestine at the very, very end of the cycle. And then it gets turned into fat. So you eat fiber, you don't actually digest any fiber. Your bacteria digest it, they turn it into fat, and you absorb that fat. And fiber can give you calories, which you have to take into account, but it's not really a digestible carbohydrate. So fiber, erythritol, which is a sweetener, it has 0 calories. You eat it, you pee it all out, you can collect it all in the urine. So anything that doesn't impact, they always say blood sugar, and that's true. But essentially, it's not metabolized. It doesn't. It can't raise blood sugar because it's not getting absorbed. The essential fats are, but that gets way absorbed in the colon, and that's what a net carb is. So a lot of times people say, "Should I count?" Some people just count everything that's carbohydrate. The problem with that is fiber does not act as a regular carbohydrate, and it really limits your food choices. So you can test it for yourself. You can take your blood before. You can use the cookie as an example. There's fiber in that, but it won't impact your blood sugar.
When it comes to the regular or the original Quest bars, were people able to eat those if they were diabetic?
Yeah. When you say original, what do you mean?
I guess the ones you have, now. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, in fact, if you look on Instagram there's a lot of people that will write to us. I've got some on my phone where they basically said, a lot of type 1 diabetics are great because they have the implantable monitor. Mm-hmm. You can't fool them. And we get letters, without exaggerating, every week saying, I cannot believe I can eat this because my food choices are very limited. I've got to always titrate my insulin to what I'm eating and literally my blood sugar. And they'll send us a picture of the.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's like 3-4 points or something. So yeah, right. And the great news about it, there's nothing better than validating it for yourself. You can take a baseline, eat any other food, and then see what happens. And then you can take a Quest bar or a Quest cookie or something and do it, and you'll see the same thing. Same with the chips. So it's.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. What was the deal with, years ago, you guys came out with this head, and I had a chance to talk to Daniel Rago a little bit about it, and he mentioned things making a comeback. What was the deal with this punching and kicking head thing that you guys had?
Okay.
Because when I was, this is before I knew you, and I saw all the different things that Quest was doing at the time, and I was like, man, that's really an offshoot from, what they're currently doing. They have a protein bar at the time. That was pretty much the only product I think you had. And then I was like, this thing is very sideways, compared to what most people talk about in business. You're trying to go like vertical and trying to be good at one thing. I'm like, this is a real offshoot. Where'd this thing come from?
So this is totally not a business move. We're just, Daniel's a friend of mine. He was on your show a couple of weeks ago, I guess.
That's right.
We've always trained in martial arts, and we just saw a problem, and in our own world, we wanted to fix it, which was, whenever you do like striking, everything that's out there for striking practice it's one plane. So if you're throwing
You
punches
see guys
at me,
hitting the pads and everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
hitting pads, I've always got to be adjusting the pad based on the kind of strike. If you're going to throw an uppercut, I got to, twist the pad one way. You're going to throw a left hook, I got to throw it this way. So I got to keep twisting it. Well, if you had a head, that's something that was anatomically correct, you can throw whatever you strike you want. I don't have to adjust. And I don't limit you. So one of the frustrating things about pads is I'm limiting and I'm kind of governing you, because if I'm not turning the pads in the right way, you can't throw the strike. So I'm basically controlling you. Well, we said, why don't we just make an anatomically correct human head that's a striking target that you can go crazy on? Plus, as a head, I can actually use the head in a way that I'm actually trying to avoid your punches. So now it's the next best thing to sparring. So it was just kind of a story we made. It's called the All Strike, and it's now being sold by Rev Gear, and it's a lot of people have used it. A lot of well-known people in UFC, et cetera, they just use it because it's a lot more realistic than a straight flat pad.
I saw you throwing some kicks and punches there. How long you been into martial arts for?
Oh, I don't know. I'd say since March 31st, 1984.
If you had to take a wild guess at it, huh?
Yeah, about that.
Do you like watching UFC? Or into some of that stuff?
Yeah, no, I like UFC for sure. There's some guys that I really enjoy.
Yeah, the training for that kind of thing is awesome. Do you still practice that? Do you still practice martial arts?
I do. Yeah, I mean it's that's kind of one of the reasons why I started lifting, and martial arts is sort of the culmination of everything. You need strength, you need flexibility, you need control, you need endurance. So it's just a good test.
In martial arts, they kind of teach you mind, body, spirit type deal. That everything's kind of connected, and there's a discipline to it. You don't just learn how to kick and then go kick the shit out of people on the street and things of that nature. Do you think that you would have a different company, perhaps, if you were never exposed to martial arts?
Yeah, I'd be a completely different person. And, I grew up in the era of martial arts where it was kind of mystical. I think now it's really a sport. So UFC has broadened the appeal, and, a thing you couldn't even imagine. And it's also removed a lot of the BS. Like in the 70s, my hands are so deadly, I can't even train with you. I'm so dangerous. I mean, they're not sure what to do with me. Well, all of a sudden, 1993, the first UFC, two guys get in a ring. They tried to kill themselves. No one died. And they realized, you know what? Humans are really resilient. Now, granted, that's because when you get knocked out, the ref's there. Obviously, you could stomp on the guy's head, and that would change that. But, striking it when two guys are on their feet, it's very difficult to hurt somebody to that degree. So it removed a lot of the mystique. But at the same time, I think we lost a lot of that whole thing. I mean, there was kind of that spiritual element. You remember the Karate Kid? I remember the first time he starts doing the blocks after his, wax on, wax off period.
Right.
People were like, this is amazing. And the Bruce Lee era, it really was about becoming a better person. And that, I think, we've definitely lost. And a lot of kids growing up with martial arts today, they don't really even get that, because they didn't see that unless they look at some Kwai Chang Caine. He would travel from city to city learning and gathering wisdom.
I kind of wish more people would take that approach with lifting. There's a lot you can learn about yourself through diet and through nutrition.
Here's a scary thought. You look at lifting is a perfect metaphor for so many things that we deal with in lives, but a lot of people are really good in the gym and they suck outside of it. And other people, Schwarzenegger, he took the lessons he learned there, he applied it to a lot of different fields, but most people aren't able to make that leap. And it isn't talked about very much, but it should be the ultimate training ground, because all of the forbearance, all of the skills you need in the gym can apply, elsewhere. You talked about that at the deadlift competition.
Yeah.
At the Arnold. And it's, it hopefully people were listening, because you're right. You're taking the exact same things there. And that's one thing, you can buy your way to a lot of things, but strength and size and a physique, you can't.
Yeah. You can't, you literally can't, buy the build that you have. You can't really buy the bench press that you have, the squat that you have. It's many, many hours of hard work in the gym. And I part of the reason why I'm so passionate about a lot of this stuff, part of the reason why I hop on this podcast all the time and trying to produce a lot of content is to kind of show people that, like, if you make this part of your life can be a lot better.
For sure.
It can make you a lot more driven. What's something that drives you?
For me, it's learning, mystery and learning. I love anything where you can't figure it out. There's a puzzle, like the cancer thing we talked about. A lot of really smart people have chewed on that. And that excites me.
Some people that are as intellectual as you are, a lot of times they're paralyzed by it and they won't take action. What do you think separates you out that has made you? A lot of times it's people that are maybe not thinking of all the steps that are down the road. They got the ability to be dumb enough to not see the obstacles, I guess, in some way.
Yeah, that's a
when you're intelligent and you read a lot and you're well educated, sometimes you're like,
Yeah, we were talking about that when we were looking at your warehouse, how you did, it's a pallet of stuff, and then pretty soon it grows, and it's a good thing you didn't know how big it was going to get. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gone down the path. So ignorance can be a pretty nice gift, and we're all ignorant at something, and I knew nothing about food manufacturing, and if I had, we might not have gone down that path. So we always think of acquisition of knowledge is always a great thing, and I actually think it's always a great thing, but sometimes you can use your ignorance to your advantage, and because you're right, if you know so much about something, either you can get paralyzed or you stop thinking about things. Elon Musk talks about that a lot. He says you got to go to first principles. Like, hey, who says the car needs gas at all? Let's go. Wait a minute. Maybe we could make a 50% gas car, hybrid, something. And I said, no. Let's go to the very, very bedrock and say, why do we need gas? Hey, why do we need drivers? So you can go take it all the way and see what you can create.
Awesome, man. Well, is there any more questions popping up over there, Andrew?
No, just somebody asking if you still take supplements like vitamins, but that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, you a vitamin mineral guy?
No. Here's the interesting thing. I'll tell you my thoughts on that. So if you look at, let's look at blueberries. People say, hey, blueberries are amazing. It's got all these anthocyanins. It's really good. They're really strong antioxidants. And I think our understanding of antioxidants is really going to change. If you look in someone's bloodstream after they eat blueberries, you don't see any anthocyanins. You see superoxide dismutase. You see other,
a lot of people feel that antioxidants are bullshit, right?
It's not that they're bullshit. They're real, but they probably move you backwards. So it's one thing that to say, hey, they're bullshit. There's no need for it. But if you look at, there's I think 3 major studies on antioxidants. 2 of them show that the people that took antioxidants were worse, and the other one showed no effect. I think it's good to be skeptical on that, because what we were, there's people that have put forth the theory that if you look at vegetables, the reason they're good for you is because they're bad for you. And the things that make vegetables good for you is they're perceived as a threat by your body when you eat them. And then you up ramp your own levels of antioxidants that you make in your body, but you don't actually measure the levels of antioxidants that you find in the vegetable. So it's, the whole concept of hormesis? No. Hormesis is the idea that a little bit of a poison is better for you than none. So it's a weird idea, but it's so anyway. That's why vitamins is probably, that's why something I don't take. But and the research doesn't seem to be bearing it out.
Yeah, Scargar wants to know if you take any right now, Mark, vitamins type of supplements.
Yeah, no, I mess around with some vitamins here and there. Mainly because, while on the carnivore diet, I just have it pounded in my head that maybe I'm missing some things. But, according to my blood work, which I didn't take a lot of vitamins for, maybe I'm not, Vitamin D is probably the one supplement that if you're not, I think it's better to get it from UV exposure. But if you're not, vitamin D is something to consider. I don't take it because I get all my vitamin D from UV, but I would if I didn't. Yeah, I my vitamin D was good, so I probably don't really need to mess with a ton of that either. Do you eat like you did the Gironda diet, Vince Gironda diet for a long time with steak and eggs and stuff like that? Are you still eating that same way? No, I did that super strict for 19 weeks, which was basically 2 meals a day, steak, eggs, and butter. You could eat pretty much as much as you wanted, and then a carb meal every 4th day. And I did that for 19 weeks, got leaner, felt great. And then now I still eat mostly a carnivorous diet, but I do eat vegetables, and, it's much looser, and I'm not just strict on just those 3 sources anymore. So you opened up the playbook a little bit. You're eating some different things. And yeah, it's obviously a lot easier to be able to either eat just a steak somewhere or whatever. You were talking about stress. I did it for 19 weeks because I wanted to see it, but to go beyond that, it starts to becoming,
you're like, okay, where am I going to eat now that I can get eggs and beef? And,
Yeah.
it's easier not to. And,
There's
and
definitely a part of it where you just don't want to be so damn weird.
Yeah, that. And also, that was actually a lot of carbs for me because every fourth day I was eating a carb day. And that's because my calories were super low. So it was basically starving myself during the first 3 days. And then the fourth day I could feel like I'd get much colder. But then after the carb meal,
when you said carbs, is that like you'd eat anything, or is it just like rice or whatever?
I did cheat meals, and I did like oatmeal and stuff like that. And definitively, because my calories were so low, if I didn't have a cheat meal, it was hard to make it to the next one. And it's a hell of a lot more fun, obviously, but I wouldn't want to do that. That was one place I saw my blood markers weren't quite as good because I was eating more carbs than I normally would be. So,
what's your favorite kind of food?
Inauthentic Mexican. So
I like
inauthentic.
People always say, "Did you mean authentic Mexican?" No, inauthentic.
It's like Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Taco Bell is amazing. Yeah, it's that typical Tex-Mex American BS Mexican. Because I've been to like authentic Mexican restaurants, and I never like it as much. So,
Yeah, probably not used to it.
Well, yeah. Although I
like fake stuff. Like I love like fake cheese and shit like that. I really do.
I grew up eating
like Velveeta is fucking great.
Yeah.
My wife actually sent me to the store to get Velveeta one time, and I had no idea where the fuck to go in the grocery store to find it. I'm like, what is it next to? Like I still don't remember where it was, but it definitely was not near any cheese. I'll tell you that much. It's like,
yeah, you're right. I guess
it's some weird fucking chemical.
You're right, because it's in the middle of the grocery store. It's not on the dairy aisle.
Do you think a lot of these foods, do you think a lot of these things are really problematic, or is it just the overconsumption of it? That's the issue.
I think certain kinds of fats hang around for years. You got, they stay in your cell membranes. And then you really have the effect on blood glucose, because the crazy thing is the difference between
talking about like trans fats or something like that.
Well, trans fats are the easy one. Everyone goes after trans fats. You can't really get trans fats anymore. That's one thing, 10 years ago you could, but they're pretty much out of the food supply, except for you can get them in restaurants. But if you look at packaged goods at the supermarket, I guess the FDA made it, you can't get even half a gram. Otherwise it's not legal. So trans fats are no longer a problem, but there are other fats like polyunsaturated fats that get rancid. When you eat those, they become part of your cell membranes and they can create problems. So
that's that whole PUFA thing, right?
That's right. PUFA is a mixed bag.
Have you heard of anything from Ray Peat? Have you heard that guy before?
Wow. How do you know about Ray Peat? Yeah, Ray Peat is interesting. In fact, some of the most thought-provoking stuff is his. Now, I think he's off base on a lot of things, but he says some things that are so amazing. Yeah, I think I actually read a lot of Ray Peat.
Yeah, he talks a lot about like iodine and stuff coming from cranberry juice, and he's got some really, for guys like us who kind of gone on the low carb side, he'll talk about drinking orange juice, and it just brings up really interesting topic that I find fascinating. Is like, I don't know, maybe all this stuff, maybe everything that we created, maybe it's not all bad.
Yeah, it's interesting because about maybe 50 or 60% of what he says, you and I would totally be on board with. And then he's got 40% that's almost the opposite. He talks about, he uses a lot of sugar.
Right.
And he makes a very
he loves
compelling,
fructose.
He does. He makes a very compelling argument that every time I read his stuff, I find myself, wow, he's really making me think. And
you played around with any of that? Have you ever had you ever have orange juice post-workout or mess with anything like that?
I did. And, orange juice post-workout's really strange because we always think of it as, fructose can't replenish muscle glycogen. So
right.
If there's any sugar that's going to more likely make you fat, 1,000 calories in fructose will make you fatter than 1,000 calories in glucose. So it really doesn't make sense. And from a performance standpoint, everyone's been taught, eat things that convert to glucose, not things that, fructose, for example, can't. So I haven't played with that. I've obviously eaten sugar in the past,
right.
But he doesn't really give specific dietary recommendations, but his forum has some of the most thought-provoking things. He talks a lot about CO2, carbon dioxide, and how it's the opposite of what many people think. So he's got a lot of stuff that I find absolutely interesting.
I got my own theory, and I think the reason why women outlive men, there's probably a lot of reasons, but I think it's just because they eat less.
I'll disagree.
Okay.
I'll tell you why women live longer than men. And I'll make it sound really authoritarian so you believe it. Here's what I think. I've just been we were talking about this earlier with iron. So if you look at a man, men will get heart attacks, sometimes at 20 or 30, but women almost never. And they thought, well, it's estrogen. Women are protected by estrogen. The only problem is if they give estrogen to men, they don't get any protection. And if you look at women who have had a hysterectomy, so if you have a woman who's had a hysterectomy at 19, she basically has the same chance of heart attack and cancer as a man. If you look at a woman that's on hormonal birth control, she has about a 50%, she's about 50% of the way to the men's line. So really what it comes down to, very likely, a big part of it is iron. It's not so much the estrogen, it's the fact that women menstruate, they lose iron, and iron is super, super reactive. And they've known for years that people that give blood have better health outcomes. Now, is that because they self-select and the people that are healthier are the people that are out there giving blood? That's also quite possible. But I don't think estrogen is protective. Ray Peat talks a lot about this, and he actually says estrogen's a real problem. And he gives very compelling rationale as to why. So I think iron is one of the big things because, women's iron levels are much, much lower. I just recently had my dogs tested, and they're both females, but they're spayed, and both of their iron levels are high. So that's probably something in canine health that's undiagnosed. And the only way to do that is I got to find someone now to take their blood. And, you can't do blood donation. I think at 3 years old is the cutoff. So you got to basically throw it in the trash.
Any poop stories from all these protein bars you've had to eat over the years?
It's interesting. I don't have a single interesting poop story that I can tell you. I have a really good GI system.
You guys had to test a lot of stuff, I'm sure, right?
I remember you're reminding me of one time in particular. No poop stories, unfortunately, but I did make a room of 11 people sick once because we bought like 40 protein bars before we started Quest. Actually, we kind of started Quest already, and we went around the room because people were they didn't know what the competition was doing. And it was one of the most important times because people became evangelists for Quest. This is our own employees. Yeah. And they were like, oh my God, I had no idea. Because a lot of the people, they'd never eaten like dozens of protein bars. And when you eat 40 protein bars, remember, we were only eating a bite of it in one day.
It's a lot of protein bars.
I'll tell you that if you ever start a protein bar company, you should have all your employees do that because they'll be like, wow, this feels like a mission now. So yeah, they didn't feel great.
Oh my God, that's absolutely brutal. Now there's a few years back, I want to say maybe it's 2 years ago, you had to change what was in the Quest bar. What prompted that? And it seems like that's a really hard ship to try to steer. Because you're not a small boat. You're a giant fucking aircraft carrier. Yeah. With a few thousand employees on it, probably, right? And you got to steer this whole thing back around. So, what happened, and why the change?
So that's a great question. So when we first started, the fiber source we used was chicory root fiber. The problem with chicory root fiber is that it's highly fermentable.
I didn't know
a lot of GI.
I didn't know that's where you started.
Yeah, that was the first one. And then we said, you know what? Let's go to the next level. Let's keep improving it. And then we went to a fiber source called isomalto oligosaccharide, known as IMO, and did that for a couple of years. And then we got an email from a group of diabetics in Colorado who said, hey, you know what? And this is before we were sophisticated at all. They're like, our blood sugars are going up a little bit on this. What's going on? So we started looking into it, and we were working with them, and we said, yeah, is there something we're not being told? Because what IMO at the time was being said, it's 90% fiber. I'll give you the short version to not bore you.
No, I like it. I like knowing the story because, I find it fascinating because I think a lot of people under normal circumstances would just sweep it under the rug and keep working. Yeah. Because it's not like the company wasn't making money.
No, it was a terrible business decision. Very smart from a product decision. So what make a long story short, we basically started, we hired 5 or 6 of the top fiber experts in the country. And we said, we're a little suspicious. We brought the manufacturer in. They assured us, no, this is great. The problem is the way IMO was you couldn't use the standard testing method. And they had this whole rationale as to why you couldn't. We got so nervous about it. We said, you know what, let's explore other forms of fiber. And then, so we were basically making Quest bars with different types of fiber. And then I got a phone call from somebody who said, hey, you know what, there was a conference, a fiber conference in Paris where they released some information. Where
I love this whole story, the fiber conference that changed Quest Nutrition forever.
I got a phone call. I remember it was about 1 p.m. on a Saturday. My business partner, Mike Osborne, of 28 years, he said, hey, listen, I just got some information. And what we decided to do, really within a matter of weeks, it should have taken 9 months to a year to gradually transition. We changed it in like a 4-week period. And a lot of customers got really pissed off because our bars went from a certain texture to, ooh, they're harder, or there were inconsistencies. It was a tough year. People were writing stuff saying, you guys change your formula because it's cheaper. I think the fiber, if I'm not mistaken, was 6 times more expensive.
Wow.
You guys are doing this because, there was a whole bunch of things. Quite simple. Here's what it is. You take an old Quest bar, take your blood sugar, eat it, take it again, and now you take a Quest bar today, and it's completely different. One would spike your blood glucose, the other didn't. And that's before we were really testing blood glucose. So it was essentially just to make a better product. We're always playing with that. But was that
just you, like just saying this is what we're doing?
Had a lot of support. I mean, here's the cool thing.
So you bounced the idea off some other guys that you work with, girls that you work with, and they gave you some feedback saying, hey, we support it. Let's go.
Yeah, well, everybody was on board just because we were starting to get, this doesn't seem like it's a good thing. But it was just the speed with which we did it. Everybody was on board. And the question is, the minute there's a better product, like if anything, we can be accused of, hey, you guys are making too many tweaks. Most like Oreos, that they try not to touch the recipe at all. But we're a nutrition company first and foremost. So if new research comes out or there's a new approach, we got to go with that. And R&D is usually kind of relegated to the corner. And hey, here's the business guys, usually run by marketing and the top execs. At Quest, R&D was that was the lifeblood of the company. So, I think there was maybe, I'm going to take a stab, 42 guys and gals in the R&D department at one point. So it's a big part of what we do.
Quest has become a huge company. I believe you guys grew 57,000%. I don't know how somebody came up with an amazing number like that in 3 years. Ranked number 2 fastest growing company in 2014. Had 200 employees in 2013, 1,300 employees in 2016, and 1,000 ambassadors to go along with the company. The growth was incredible of the company. How has the company changed from that point? Because I know that you mentioned you guys used to you guys did a lot of stuff in-house, and then now the company's changed quite a bit, right?
Yeah. So in the last, I'd say about 2 years ago, we started realizing, hey, Quest has gotten to a certain size where it needs a different skill set. So about a year, in fact, almost exactly a year ago, we brought on a new CEO. His name is Dave Ritterbush. And rarely in life do things work out as well as you envision them.
Were you ever the CEO of the company?
I was the CEO for the first 6 years, yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so, and about a year ago, we brought this guy on, and we said, hey, this is going to be an experiment. Wow. It's funny how, I'm not a structure guy because I don't like people imposing structure on me, so I don't want to impose it on other people. And it was interesting watching this guy come in. He basically came in and learned, and we could just feel like to get to the next level, we needed to do more systems and things. He has a lot of experience. He was with Dryers for 17 years. He's been in nutrition, CEO of Premier.
Ice cream.
Yeah. And he basically added a level of structure that's allowed us to grow much faster. So if you look at what's going to happen over the next 2 years, the number of products we're going to launch much, much bigger. You want to talk about an amazing experiment. The guy is, Mike and I are basically in note-taking mode because it's one set of skills to grow a company from 0 to, 100 million or 300, 400 million. It's a different skill set to go from 400 to $1 billion. So that's one thing that's changed. The other thing is we used to make all of our own products here in California at City of Industry. We had I think 11 or 1,200 employees at that facility at one time. And we have now moved to a fractured model. We now have, I think, 11 different facilities throughout the country that we work with that are outsourced because we just couldn't keep bringing on that much expertise and that much that much machinery, especially since some of the products coming out in the next couple of years are very far away from protein bars. We just could never be able to do that. And our goal really is, as I said earlier, is that Super Bowl table. You want to be able to eat all that kind of stuff. And that's a very, very disparate skill set than just making protein bars.
Yeah, people don't know about our ice cream experiment that we have going on behind closed doors.
That's right. That's.
Or we were not supposed to say anything about that, I guess.
No.
Too late.
So last question.
Yep.
Here it is. You could easily kind of like, walk away from the company a little bit and, sit there and you've accumulated a lot of cash, but you don't. You're still there. You're still at a lot of the trade shows. I see you there. I see it like this year, you and Bruce are walking around, which is actually kind of funny because I don't think Bruce has ever kind of took you around in that way before.
He's a machine.
You found out that Bruce was the actual owner of Quest Nutrition,
right.
which is
That's right.
which is news to you, right? Why are you still going to the shows?
It's really easy. When I was in software, I'd go to the trade shows. I'm not going to them now because I wasn't that interested in software. But this is what I'm interested in, and it's actually better positioned to learn. I mean, here we are talking about all kinds of weird stuff, and I'm going to go back and use it. That's what's neat. So that's why it doesn't. I don't like working as much as you don't, but just as you've created here, when I walk through the halls here, it's like, wait, people are laughing, people are smiling. You're talking about doing blood work for employees, and it's the geek stuff that is what's fun. So that's why it's not like I have to even think about it. I'm going to do it one way or another. I may as well.
You're not like, I got to go to the show.
Definitely not. I think that was my 9th Arnold. Have you been to a bunch of them?
Yeah, I've been to a ton of them. And you actually, I'm sure you met Arnold before, but I saw you got a picture with him at the Arnold this year, I think, right?
No, he got a picture with me, actually.
Oh, hey now. I'll have to, when I get a chance to interview him, I'll have to ask him what it was like to meet.
Actually, I'll tell you the story that had nothing to do with me. My wife is, the reason, actually, she's cut out of that picture there, but you've seen the video or whatever. Her dad is Chet Yorton. And Chet is a very famous bodybuilder from the golden age of bodybuilding, one of 3 men ever to beat Schwarzenegger in competition.
Holy shit.
So he comes by to the booth.
That's right, Arnold. What's up?
He comes by. Bruce does a really good job because he'll say, hey, don't you want to meet Chet Yorton's daughter? He's like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen her since she was in diapers. So that's how he entices.
Bruce is amazing.
Bruce is, he's a former police officer, Marine recon, and generally, when you think about that person, do you think about like a super nice guy who can get in anywhere? No, that background leads you to be a tough guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I have been in situations where he gets you like beyond the little velvet ropes and things, and he doesn't piss people off.
He has an ability to make it seem like it's not a big deal.
He does.
All right, here's a couple bars, and then he'll start talking about something else.
That's right.
And he just kind of like leaves him there, and he's like, never show up empty-handed. And what was great is when we had an event here. We had a deadlift competition up this way, bench and deadlift competition. Bruce came up to it. He sent a bunch of products up, of course. He comes, he checks out our party. I didn't know where the boxes were. I wasn't sure. I don't really handle a lot of that kind of stuff, So we have tables set up. We got food out. We're having a party here at the gym, and we invited friends and family and stuff like that. Bruce shows up and he's like, where are those Quest cookies? And he goes on a mission. He just starts, rifling through stuff, and he gets them himself. He sets them up and everything. And I was just like, man, you know what? That's just what it takes. I sometimes run into people, and I'm like, man, I don't want to like force this guy to put a slingshot on, but if I don't tell him what I do and I don't show him, he'll never fucking know.
Look, you put your finger on it. I am terrible at that. I never have product with me. I never talk about it. Bruce is a machine. And you want to talk about where the rubber meets the road in terms of actually building a brand. He goes around, you saw this year at the Arnold, he was taking me around, introducing me to people. He's given product. He understands the mechanics of building a brand at the human level. And he's unabashed, and he does it in a really cool way where people feel like he did them a favor. You probably feel like, oh, I don't want to like push this on someone. That's how I feel. Bruce is so elegant in the way he does it. He's a high powered weapon. He really knows how to do it.
And he's consistent. And
he's super
so
consistent.
then you're kind of just like, okay, that's just the way he is. So you're not like, what is it? A lot of times in this industry, we're always thinking someone's trying to like do something. They're trying to like put one over on you. They're trying to snap a picture with you with some product that you don't have any association with, or, maybe you're already with another company. So it's a little weird. They put you in a weird,
Sure.
Here, you mind holding this? It's like, I don't know what, but he's not really that way. He's just like, hey, try this. I think you'll like it. He kind of just leaves it there. It's not like he's giving you a dissertation about about all the reasons why you need this product. But yeah, he does a great job of getting you guys in great places. What I find really awesome about the company is that you guys stay connected to a lot of the smaller things. People can figure out. You said the human connection, the human connection of the brand, and that's everything.
It is.
It's everything. Facebook ads, Instagram ads, has these sponsored ads and stuff, and spending money on educating people on what you have and your website and all these things. Obviously, they all play into it. They're all a piece of the puzzle. But it is a huge, huge part of it to have a human connection with people. And no one does it better than Bruce.
No, and you think about how many people we've talked about, just kind of like we talked about the guys at ASPI and the Ketogenic Bible. We talked about Daniel Arago. We talked about, it's in our circle. And I can tell instantly if I were bringing up half of this stuff and you were like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're not in the group, so to speak.
Right.
And you're right, that human connection, we're doing this and we're just sharing it spontaneously. And Bruce he's completely there. He spends more time on a plane. I don't quite understand. I see Bruce quite a bit, but if you open Instagram up, how can a person be in 17 places in 1 week? I don't. I mean, it's crazy. It's truly crazy.
He takes pictures with a tremendous amount of beautiful women. I noticed.
I think that's probably when people think about Bruce, it's probably the number one they think they notice.
What a terrible side product of that job. He's got to meet all these bombshells all the time.
He's talked to me about this. He suffers a lot, but he's willing to go through it. He will do it if he has to.
He's gonna keep
building
doing
a brand.
Yeah, you're right though. He's with look, even in that right there, he's with Arnold, he's with Bradley Martin, he's hanging with me, he's hanging with all these fitness chicks, and he's just everywhere. Anyway, man, it was awesome having you on the show. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on your way out here.
No, it's just really cool to come here. There's a powerlifting gym on one side of the building. And then on the other side, I'm looking at pictures of world domination, how you guys are getting into Finland and you're getting into Kuwait. And I was thinking, wow, it's rare because usually people that have a business side, it's boring. And then people who are on the powerlifting meathead side, they can't build a business
right.
to save their lives. It's too much organization. And to see the warehouse and how you guys have the shipping set up.
It has been a big learning process for me because I kind of would fashion myself, if anything, as an inventor. I've always been curious about product, and for several years I just messed around with a lot of powerlifting gear, bench shirts and squat suits and knee wraps and stuff, and I just developed a kind of feel for them, and I would mess with them all the time and try to do different things, and I'd wrap my elbow because I had pain from a certain thing, or I'd wrap my knees, and I was just always like really fascinated. I'm like, there's something here, and I just keep tinkering and messing with it. So to take an idea and to turn it into a product, and then to put it on the market, it's weird because it's like, okay, well, I put it on the market, now I'm just getting started. And now I don't even have any clue on what to do because I don't have any education in any of this.
Well, see, so many people are the inventor side. Hey, I got this product. Well, that's probably the easiest. It's also maybe the most fun if you're an inventor, but it's
right.
Very few people that say, hey, I see all these other skills. I suck at them and I'm still going to do it anyway. And that's really what separates the men from the boys, in the sense that you're right. You did suck at that. You told me your whole story about how you started with your next door neighbor and you kind of convinced him to help you out shipping, and now you would think, oh yeah, he probably had these skills his whole life. But that's really what is, people always ask, hey, what's the secret to entrepreneurs? It's building that team and then being able to pick up new skills. Because if you think you're going to have it all there, nobody. You might be able to make a slingshot the first time out, and then there's 17 steps you still have to go.
Yeah, I've been a big believer in putting the cart before the horse. I'll do it every single time, and if I have to pull the cart myself, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's putting yourself in a situation where you can't really stop. I started this momentum. I got it, and then everyone's looking at you saying, "Hey, what's next?" I have no idea. Let's kind of make it up as we go, which is a lot more fun, and you get to see that here when you walk through the halls.
Do you have any desire to get into any other type of business or anything like that?
I'm focusing on biotech right now because there's some things that I want to do with cancer. Well, I think early diagnosis of cancer. I will certainly be back on your show when I have
That's awesome.
couple of experiments done. But the Ketopet thing really cool. Turned into there's something powerful there. Early detection is going to be really the future. And liquid biopsies, the ability to take someone's blood. Did you hear about this woman that developed some sort of process where you can just prick your finger and you can get a full blood analysis, like, rather than taking out tons of blood from you? Yeah. Have you heard about that? Sure, I know all about it.
So then they something happened where somebody stripped the woman of her invention or something like weird like that has happened, and no one's doing anything with it at the moment, or something like that happened.
Are you talking about Theranos?
I believe so.
Yeah,
a woman from what I understand, she wanted to make this thing that you could just prick your finger and you can, get your blood work done that way.
Yeah. So here's the story on that. She raised a lot of money. I don't remember the exact amount. She had a board of directors of some of the most recognizable people, none of whom were scientists, or at least none of people that were in the diagnostic space. And she just got convicted of fraud last week.
Shit.
So the company is, look, I think she truly was trying to do something amazing. I think what she set out to do, take a little finger prick, because going to one of the worst things like blood, like you had to do that for your employees. It's a pain. You have to get a phlebotomist out here. If you could just prick your finger like you do with like a blood sugar test, it would be amazing. The problem is the technology didn't match the reality, and they raised more and more money. And it looks like, allegedly, I think you're supposed to say, they knew it was crashing. And, I think I have a guy that I know ended up committing suicide. They just got themselves into this situation where they can't back away because they've made so many promises, and they just have to keep running with it. And the whole thing came crashing down. So it actually turned out to be fraud at the end, but a great idea.
Yeah, hopefully we can see more stuff like that. Anyway, good luck with everything. Awesome having you here today, guys. That's Ron Penna. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. We are out of here unless you got something else you're going to...
I just want everybody that's on the live stream, well, first off, thanks for being there. But we're actually going to be podcasting with Ben Greenfield coming up next. Maybe, hopefully, a couple hours, maybe, or 15 minutes.
Probably in a little bit. Yeah.
All right, sooner than later. So, hang on for a little while, and we'll be back soon.
Catch you all later. Bye. Thanks, man. That was